But I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown and amuse you?
Oh, it's good to be back.
I'm the guy who does his job. You must be the other guy.
Yeah, maybe after 9/11 where everybody got so sensitive. Thanks a lot, Bin Laden.
Hello, you don't know? It means all no fuckers know.
I'm as mad as hell, but I'm not going to take this anymore.
You can't handle the truth.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Your List Sucks, episode number 67. I'm Kirk Kowalkowski, your reigning Your List Sucks Top 100 champion. After 11 weeks, Cody had the bad idea that you guys wouldn't be sick of me yet, so he's let me host tonight. And it's 70's night on YLS. We're talking 70's movies, the best decade for music, the best decade for people to be born in, the best decade for music. All my opinion, but when we're on the show and I'm in this chair, my opinion becomes fact. So let's meet our panel. I told Cody I would talk about the 70s, and he gave me a bunch of guys born in the late 90s. This will work out great. Let's start out first. We got he is the reigning co-champion, Warzone Teams co-champion, representing Australia in tonight's program. It is the Golden God, Michael Campbell. Michael, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Yeah, this is going to be fun. Very nervous, as always, is with YLS anytime I appear on camera. But yeah, should be fun. And I do want to make a note before we start. I made a personal decision to only make it one director per movie. So I'll explain why later, but I figured it'd be fun. Let's have some fun.
Sounds like a cop-out. We'll see. Also joining us tonight.
70s. What better way to represent 70s than the OC?
Exactly. Like
yes,
I said.
yes.
All right. Also joining us, making, I believe, his second consecutive appearance anyway. You know him as the great Gonzo. He is Theo's dad and Zack Ford. Zack, welcome back. How you feel about tonight's show?
I feel good. I literally forget it's a competition every time until you say, I'm the champion. So I feel like that just destines me to lose every time. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, and besides these two peons, we have two celebrities with us tonight. One, a much bigger celebrity than the other, but both technically celebrities in these circles. First, we'll start out with, you know him. He used to live in this world until he elevated to movie trivia Valhalla. It is the former Schmoedown world champion, Paul Oyama. Paul, how are you tonight?
Yeah, it's good to be on. This is a really fun panel. Obviously, all people that I'm really good friends with. I think this will be exciting. I made even more qualifications than Michael and chose to exclude a lot of films for personal reasons to make this a more interesting list. So we'll see if people hate me for that. I know Kirk will hate me for one of my decisions. Let's see.
All right, we'll see how that plays out. And also joining us, special guest tonight, you know him from the OA, from Color Out of Space, from The Guest, and of course the movie Trivia Schmoedown. It is the kid, Brendan Meyer. Brendan, what are you doing here? This is kind of beneath you.
No. Hey, look.
I called your agent maybe.
When you're not booking gigs. Gigs, man.
Hey, man, talking movies is never beneath me, especially 70s movies. So, yeah, it was fun to get to put together the list. And, yeah, there was a couple things I omitted, but for the most part, it is definitely my favorites of this. Well, in the early stages, I went with a couple things I just wanted to highlight. I felt like in the 8 to 9, 10 to 11, 12, 13, 14 range was a bit murky. But, yeah, when we get to the top of the list, I think these are not just some of the best films of the 70s, some of the best of all time. So,
yeah, that's the thing, guys. A lot of right answers here. It's going to be hard to get this wrong. Let's just do this. Everybody give me good answers. We'll get through this quick. 45 minutes, bing, bang, boom. We'll be out of here. You all know how it works. We're going to do 10, 9, 8. Just me and the contestant talking. We'll discuss those movies. We'll go further into it. If someone says it mentions a movie you have further or higher up on your list, make sure you say yikes, and we'll come back to that later. But let's start out with Paul. Mr. Oyama, give us your 10, 9, and 8.
So for number 10, an essential director of the 70s, probably not the pick most people would expect. That's Robert Altman's Brewster McCloud is my number 10. My number 9 is a film I watched for the first time recently. It was kind of a blind spot for a long time. Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven.
Yikes.
And then my number 8 is the only collaboration between an actor and director who I wish had worked together more. And that's the final film of Ingrid Bergman. It's Ingmar Bergman's Autumn Sonata.
All right. Okay, so go ahead. Give me your number. Talk about your number 10, Brewster McCloud.
So Brewster McCloud is this really weird, twisted, kind of bitter movie about sort of the overlooked members of our world. And it's this kid played by Bud Cort, who you might know from Harold and Maude, living in the Houston Astrodome, and he's making these mechanical wings to be able to fly. And this is the introduction of Shelley Duvall to the world. It's an incredible, really weird and dark and twisted movie that I think is so funny and so interesting. And I love that the way that it comes together at the end is so masterful. Obviously, my number 9 was the Yikes. And my number 8 is Autumn Sonata. So this is, again, Ingrid Bergman plays a mother who comes home to visit her daughter, who she has a very tenuous relationship with, and it's sort of them reconciling their relationship together. This is an immaculate performance by the 2 lead actresses. It's heartbreaking, and it's a really simple movie, but I think it shows what a brilliant director can get out of actors with just great writing and great direction. It's so moving, and it's tough to watch at times, but I think it's an incredible movie. Again, it's crazy that Bergmans didn't work together more. I thought they were related for a long time, honestly. But yeah, just an incredible film.
Okay, started out strong. Your number 10, Brewster McCloud. I have not seen. I've heard about it. Your description sounds really interesting. So I'm kind of starting to get a little more into Altman. So this one I definitely want to check out. Your number 9 was Yikes. Number 8, Autumn Sonata. I watched this because you put this on the list. I had not seen it yet. Bergman's another one. I'm just starting to see, kind of dip my toe in the water there. This movie is terrifying. I watched this. It felt like I was watching a horror movie. As a parent and a parent of a child, this is, like you said, very difficult to watch, and just to see how people can destroy each other's lives so easily. And it's just really beautifully shot. I love how it's kind of shown through her husband's perspective, like he's our eyes through the movie.
Into,
yeah, and just his take on it is really interesting, and just watching him watch these people suffer is really hard to do. So I think that's a really solid pick. I really thank you for putting on this list, because that gave me a chance to watch this, and I really liked it. But let's move on to Zach. Zach, let's give me your 10, 9, 8.
All right, my number 10, different Terrence Malick movie. I went with Badlands. And number 9, I went with Carrie. And my 8, the one super obvious one I couldn't deny, Jaws.
I have it at the same
time. Okay, so
you say copycat.
When we get there, then go ahead and talk about your 10 and your 9, and then you and Michael can both talk about Jaws.
All right. As it seems like the others did, I made a list that ignores some of the most obvious ones to make room for ones that aren't talked about on the show much. And also, there's a lot of bias on my list given the ones I've seen in the past 2 years, because I like to sound as intelligent as possible. So when choosing between movies, I was like, I see this recently, and I won't like as much of a dumbass as I normally would. Badlands is the exception. I haven't seen it for like 6 years. So my memory is hazy. I can barely remember my social security number at this point, and I don't even know where my card is. So it's gonna be problematic when it happens. So I'll do my best. But early Terrence Malick is still my favorite form of Terrence Malick, and I think because there's a little more of narrative cohesion mixed in with his natural and spiritual stylism they put in there. I think later he got so caught up in this, but this I'll still be able to get caught up in his kind of poetic mindset, but also following along with a story that's engaging, exciting, and has strong performances. I forgot to set my timer, and now I talked for too long. Okay.
All right, good. Give me Carrie.
My number 9 would be Carrie. This is my favorite horror movie. I don't react very viscerally a lot to a lot of horror movies. I think I feel fairly disconnected, but Carrie, for some reason, maybe, as a teacher amongst teenagers that may lose their mind and destroy me with their paranormal talents at some point, that'll probably how I'll go out. I think it hits me on a different level, and I think also because I can empathize with the teenagers' pain, helps me really feel for what Carrie is going through as well. So, number 9.
All right, then you go ahead, Jaws, and then Michael will get it after you.
Yeah, Jaws. I was going to leave it off because it's a very obvious one, but it's also, it's obvious for a reason. It's the blockbuster of all blockbusters. It's timeless. I saw it in the theaters recently, and I can't wait to take my son to the theaters because it's just as exciting as a summer movie. as ever. I'm going to take him as a 2-year-old, by the way. So that's what I mean. Take him. He needs to know the dangers of the waters. But no, it holds up in every which way as far as how scary it can be. It's also how funny and how great the characters are drawn, which is makes it really special. So.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it had to be on if I was making like an all-time list, this would be like my top 5 ever. Yeah. But I feel like it had to be represented. I thought someone would have it at least like 7 or higher. Turns out it didn't happen. But I mean, this is just like one of the most perfect movies ever. The 3 leads have such great chemistry, and I mean, yeah, what can be said about Jaws? It hasn't already been said.
Okay. I'm 0 for 2 on your number 10s. I have not seen Badlands yet. This is another one I want to see, just haven't gotten around to yet. I haven't really got my hands on it. Carrie is really good. It's funny you mentioned, how it affects you as a teacher. I think Stephen King was working as a substitute teacher when he wrote this, and I think it really affected him. His take on seeing kids go through that and just doing what he does, taking like real life horror and putting a supernatural spin on it. Cece Spacek's great in this, and it is really scary. And just just like seeing her, like she's the monster and she has the powers, but then you look at her mother and her mother's the real monster. And again, that's what King does so great, is create real world horror within the supernatural horror. A lot of times the real world horror is worse. And that's what I love about that. And that's what's great about this movie. And yeah, Jaws, like you said, Michael, what hasn't been said about Jaws? I love the characters in this movie. I think I like the second half a lot better when it's just them. That scene on the boat, they're just so well clearly defined, and why they're there and what they're doing. And their motivation is so clear, and just a great arc for all 3 guys. I really love that. Great script, obviously great directed. The stories about the shark not working and how fortuitous that was. Just kind of like a perfect movie that we kind of shouldn't have got, but we did, and it's fantastic. So Brendan, we'll come to you now. Give us your 10, 9, 8.
Sure. So number 10, I also went with another Robert Altman, which is Robert Altman's The Long Goodbye. Number 9, I went with Bob Fosse's Cabaret. And number 8, actually, I went with a movie that I just saw for the first time a few months ago, but really wanted to include because I wasn't even really aware of it until this year, which is Elio Petri's Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion.
All right.
Which I think is a really, really cool film. Like I said, I didn't even know about it at the beginning of the year, and then I saw it recently. So, number 10, The Long Goodbye is really cool. Elliot Gould plays character of Philip Marlowe, who's the character that Humphrey Bogart played in The Big Sleep, and Robert Mitchum played him many times. And what's cool is that it feels very, very, in terms of tone and style, feels actually very, very removed from classic detective noirs of the kind of classic era, and kind of updates it to a more, I guess at the time, sort of modern-ish setting. And it's really cool because it has a very similar plot. Philip Marlowe getting drawn into, a disappearance and his things involving his friends, and it has those sort of wild noirish characters, but it has this very contemporary setting. The opening scene is he wakes up and just goes to get some cat food for his cat, and there's these hippies living across the street from him in his apartment, and it actually has a very early appearance of Arnold Schwarzenegger and just in a cameo, but it's got really, really great performances. I believe Sterling Hayden is in it, unless I'm totally botching that. Sterling Hayden is really, really great in it, and it's just so fun for me as someone who's a sucker for those kinds of noirs, a detective going down a rabbit hole of lies, deceits, colorful characters, and to kind of see it in that sort of Altman-y kind of way, I thought was really, really great. Number 9, Cabaret. I was thinking about for this slot just kind of unique achievements as well. And Cabaret to me is such a fascinating because the musical involves the people who work and kind of orbit the cabaret, the Kit Kat Club. And Michael York is in it. Liza Minnelli, I believe, won an Oscar for playing Sally Bowles. And it really is just about this sort of love triangle, turns almost a polyamorous relationship between these people. Joel Grey plays the master of ceremonies. And I think what's really cool about Cabaret is that as a musical, and movies like Chicago have done this since and stuff, but there's no real breaking into song. It's a musical, but the numbers almost exist on their own within the cabaret, within the club. And that to me is really, really interesting because it allows the movie to have these amazing musical numbers and these great songs, but without it sort of breaking the reality in the world of what they're dealing with. And the thing that I love about Cabaret is just the way that, obviously it's dealing with right before the rise of the Nazi party and all that different stuff. And I just think like the way that they layer in this sort of impending horror is really, really interesting and kind of makes it unique among movie musicals for many reasons. And then Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, I don't want to give too much away, but it's an Italian film. I won the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film when it came out. And I don't know how much I want to say, but basically it opens with a murder being committed, and the man who commits the murder is sort of in a position of influence that you wouldn't necessarily expect a murderer to be in. And I just think the themes are very, very relevant. These themes of when justice goes away, what that does to a society. And as an early Ennio Morricone score, which is really, really interesting. And it's just great. It's really cool. And I'd never heard of it before. And I was just so taken by the premise, which I almost don't even want to spoil. If you go in cold, you're really you're gonna be on a real interesting ride. Just a lot of really creative camera work, a memorable score. So those are my three that I went with at the beginning.
Okay, cool. Long Goodbye. This is another one. This has been sitting on my Prime watch list forever. Finally got around to it because you put it on the list, and I really enjoyed this one. Elliot Gould is great in this. This is probably my favorite Elliot Gould performance. He really just slips into that Philip Marlowe role so well, just that kind of like schlubby, like laid back, just whatever kind of guy. I love the characters. I think it's kind of what I liked about this movie. It's a very Altman-y take on those kind of old style noirs with the camera movements and a lot of improvised natural dialogue. I love the fact that the mystery itself is kind of irrelevant. It's almost just like a very loose framework, an excuse for him to like go on all these adventures and meet all these very interesting characters. Sterling Hayden is great. I'm a big Sterling Hayden fan, and he's really good in this. This is a great pick. Great number 10. Cabaret, not so much. Not a big fan of Cabaret.
Not a big fan of it, right? Oh.
No. Cabaret, I just don't like the way this movie looks. It's kind of like, it's just like an ugly looking movie. It's just kind of got like that cloud over it that I don't like. I don't like the music. I'm not a fan of the characters. I don't connect to any of them. I think they're just kind of like shallow and vapid, and I don't root for them. And it drives me crazy that Fosse beat Coppola for Best Director. That just blows my mind. I kind of think I have a little bit of a slight against me because of that. And then Citizen Above Suspicion. I'm sure you'll forgive me. I haven't seen this one. It's not on Criterion Channel, so I didn't get the chance to watch it.
It just left.
It just left. Yeah, that's what I watched it on, was Criterion Channel. Yeah, no, I don't blame it. I mean, like I said, this is the one that, like, as someone who's been a movie fan for years, I had no knowledge of this until like 4 months ago or whatever, and I just thought it sounded like so interesting, and I really enjoyed it when I took the plunge.
Yeah, that's just my luck. That happens to me often, especially with trivia matches. I need a movie for trivia. It disappears from streaming the minute it gets put on.
I don't think there'll be any trivia questions about this one, but I would love to see. I'd love to see it up somewhere. This is one of those ones I watch when I'm not studying for the Schmodown.
Yeah. Yeah, that's your break movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Michael, we talked about your 8, but give me your 10 and your 9.
Yeah, my number 10 is The China Syndrome. And my number 8, my number 9 is Barry Lyndon.
Okay, so give me.
My number 8 was Jules. So The China Syndrome. This is basically, so just the general premise of this is a reporter and her camera crew go to a nuclear plant and do like a report. While they're there, something goes wrong. They film it, like Michael Douglas plays the cameraman who films it, unknowingly to the people who work there. And it's sort of about like just the way corporations can control media. Jane Fonda plays a brilliant reporter. There's a little bit of underseeds of like, not so much subtle, but it's a lot of sexism in the 70s about reporters. Like there's comments that you just hear about the way she looks, her hair. Should she diet? Should she not? And there's a real sort of documentary behind the scenes look at the way this whole thing gets reported and sort of the underbelly of the way corporations can control media. Jack Lemmon he gives like one of my favorite performances I've seen from him. He sort of goes a bit crazy all the way through. So it's very interesting to watch his whole arc. And I don't want to spoil too much, but it's the general premise of it.
Okay. China Syndrome, number 10, another 10 I have not seen yet. This is another one. It's on my list. I just haven't gotten around to it. If I'd had more time this week, I would have watched it. Main reason I want to see is the little bits and pieces I have seen. Jack Lemmon looks amazing. This is just like a performance that's right up his alley. So I do plan on watching this soon. Just haven't seen it yet. Okay, so that is the everybody's bottom three. Now we're going to get into it. Everybody else is going to have a chance to talk about the rest of these movies. So Paul, why don't you go ahead and start us off with your number 7?
So you might have seen this flashed a little bit earlier. And this is Joseph Sargent's The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. This is one of my favorite 70s crime movies. I think it's got like one of the most immaculate endings of really any movie ever. The final shot and what happens at the very end is incredible. Robert Shaw is so engaging as the sort of leader of this crew that takes this train hostage. I love all the kind of little twists and turns. You think it's going one way and then it pivots into another. It's like a really rewatchable movie for something that's pretty dark. Like it's pretty fun and the dialogue is really great and loose. I love Walter Matthau. It's kind of the guy at the train station who's communicating with them. But honestly, all the 4 main robbers are all incredibly engaging. Hector Elizondo, who like is probably more known for like being the guy in Pretty Woman, who's like the hotel manager, is amazing. Martin Balsam, obviously, who's in like Psycho and 12 Angry Men. But yeah, it's just a great crime film that is fun to watch, dark, and again has like a really great wrap up that sort of all culminates in this one moment. And it's sort of all of the events of the film sort of culminate into these people. And I love the mayor of New York is a really great side character in this one too. So yeah.
Yeah, I really love this movie. I love the tone, like you said, when they're on the train and you're with the thieves. It's very dark and very serious, but when you're with Walter Matthau, never lose that kind of like Walter Matthau spirit. It kind of has that like
the goofy big tie.
Exactly, yeah. Like he's like he's like another just schlubby cop, and he's kind of like thrown in the situation. So I love him in this movie. Jerry Stiller is really good in this in his small role. Martin Balsam, Robert Shaw, the whole gang is really good. Yeah, this is a really tense, fun thriller. So it's a really great pick, Paul. Good job. What's everybody else think about Taking the Pelham 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, I love it too. I think it's great. I mean, this is. I also want to say the one thing that has been mentioned is the score is just fantastic. I think the music that just it's one of those things where the score is just so terrific that it grabs you from that opening. And agree, great ending. And yeah, I mean, I guess all the performances have been mentioned. And yeah, just from Balsam to Jerry Stiller to Matthau, I highly approve of this pick. I think it's really, really great. I really like these types of thrillers, not necessarily just because it's a hostage thriller, but these sort of contained thrillers, 2 men on opposite sides of the phone, or I mean, those things are always just so great, especially when you have great actors. And yeah, this is awesome. I like this movie a lot.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I approve of the pick because I'm in a nice mood and trains are cool.
I have seen. I saw this last year, so that's basically the reason it's not on my list, because I didn't just get a chance to rewatch it. Like I agree with everything that has been said. The ending is spectacular, and this takes place over one day, right? Or is the ending a couple of days?
Yeah.
No.
So
I think it's the same day.
I think it's
same day. Yeah, same day.
Yeah. So like it just the energy of that is all compacted in, and you just feel this like sense of urgency every time.
Yeah.
So it's
the cops driving around all over New York.
Yeah. All right, Paul, very solid pick. What is your number 6?
Number 6 is a movie I watched for the consideration on this list. It's a movie I've never seen from this director. It's Paul Schrader's Blue Collar, which is the first film he ever directed. And essentially it's about these 3 men who work in an auto shop. It's Harvey Keitel, Yaphet Kotto, and Richard Pryor. And they all decide to rob their union bank vault. And it really is this exploration of what happens to people that are lower on the ladder when they try to mobilize and move up. And I think it's a lot of punishment for the way that their behavior is. And there's a lot of great racial tension between Harvey Keitel and Richard Pryor and Yaphet Kotto. There's a lot of like great sort of satirical elements. There's a certain billboard that is shown randomly throughout the movie that shows like how many auto parts have been created, and it's this sort of dry, weird humor placed into an otherwise really serious movie. It's again incredible social commentary. Richard Pryor with like one of honestly the great performances of the 70s, I think, with this guy who just kind of had enough and hates the position he's in, but doesn't know how to change their circumstances. And it's these people, again, it's trying to take themselves from the bottom to the top. And it shows you what happens kind of to them when that happens. It's got a great last act, especially how it kind of kicks into gear at the very end. And you see the very ending is so poetic, the way that it ends up. And you look at the way that it started. It's kind of comes full circle in such a satisfying way. It's just a terrific, terrific movie that I couldn't recommend highly enough.
Yeah, this is another one that I hadn't watched. I wanted to because I want to get more into the Schrader's directorial work. But since you put on a list, that gave me an excuse to watch it. I really, really like this. It's a personal movie for me because I grew up in a very working class, blue collar union home. And I know that feeling of being stuck between the union and the company and the anxiety, being powerless and that, and the anxiety that causes, and the stress that brings on your home. I've felt that, and I know what that is. So I connected with these characters very strongly. Richard Pryor gives a great performance. Made me wish he had done a lot more dramatic work because he's really good in this. Him and Keitel are great together. I've watched this something. Yaphet Kotto is really underrated. Like
he's so good.
He should be talked about more. He's so good in this. It has a good score. And like you said, like the story just wraps up really well. There is some like humorous elements dropped in here and there, and it's so out of place that it just makes it even better. But yeah, I think this is a really solid pick. Everybody else thoughts on Blue Collar?
I haven't seen it. There was a chance to see it last year at a theater. It was like 90 minutes away, and I would have taken the day off work. But so I'm really regretting not being able to see it in the theaters. But I do really want to see it because I know it is his debut, and I also want to get more into Schrader.
Yes, same. Funnily enough, I've watched a ton of Schrader this year. Actually, films he's directed, and this is one that I haven't gotten to yet. So I'm gonna have to get on this even sooner because I'm a big fan of Schrader as a director. I actually think I enjoy almost every film of his I've seen that he directed to some degree. So. And some a lot. So I'm excited to see this actually now, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I also haven't seen it, but there's more important Richard Pryor works to be discussed later on this list.
Is he selling something?
All right, Paul, you're number 5.
Number 5, this is a partial apology to leaving an actor off for another movie that they were in. And probably not the movie you would expect from this director, or most people would expect. One of my favorite action films of all time, and that's William Friedkin's Sorcerer. This is a remake of the film The Wages of Fear from 1953. And essentially Roy Scheider and 3 other men are these criminals who are sent to the jungle, and they have to drive this truck with these chemicals on it. It's basically like a wet dynamite. And they have to try to get it through the jungle without it exploding. And the whole movie is just this balancing act of tension where the entire time it's keeping the tension at such a high rate that it seems hard to sustain, but somehow through little tricks and turns, they manage to keep that sort of anxiety filled into your chest. It's got all these great big action sequences with these great explosions and these super tense. There's a scene on the bridge that's like where the poster's from. That is like one of the most tense scenes you'll ever see. Roy Scheider is incredible. He's super grimy and dirty. And this movie is like, not really interested in being like and showing him off as sort of a leading man, like there's a different version of this movie that stars a different actor, like a Steve McQueen kind of type, but that's just not the kind of movie that this is. It starts off with these great vignettes that show you how the criminals get there to the jungle, and it's just a nonstop thrill ride with an incredible conclusion. One of the great, again, it's such a 70s action film, so it's not like crazy shooting and all this kind of stuff, but it's just great tension, and it keeps you engaged the entire time and never really lets up.
I have not had the chance to see Sorcerer yet, but I have seen Wages of Fear. So based on that, I'm going to give you passing marks on this one because I really like Wages of Fear. If it recreates any of that tension, like you said, the bridge scene, then I know it's really good. So based on that, good pick. Everybody else on Sorcerer.
I'll go. I ordered the Blu-ray in from the US, and it literally got here the day before our lists were due. So I was like, I had a pretty good feeling it'd be on Paul's list. So I decided to wait, and I watched it like 2 days ago, and I loved it. It is everything Paul said. I agree. I will say Roy Scheider's nose is a bit distracting at first. I was like, are they going to go the whole movie with this? And then we find out, obviously, it makes sense. So I was like, I always love when like directors take people's like real life sort of characteristics, physical sort of looks, and infuse it into the movie. So I thought that was pretty brilliant. But like you said, the bridge scene is just incredible, and you're like, were they actually on the bridge? Yep, turns out probably were. So yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah.
I really like this movie a lot too. Like Paul was saying, that the opening of this film is great. The way they set up each individual character that are going to intertwine here in the jungle. That's what struck me the most about it when I watched it the first, is how it really grabs you right away. It's been a couple of years since I've seen it, but I think many of the vignettes that open it are kind of minimalist too, not super dialogue heavy, very sort of like visceral, and they put you in it there. And what's great is that you get these all in a row, which is great. And like you're saying, it gets into this action movie mode with these thrilling sort of sequences, and yet it does really ground you in the characters first and really ground you in their situation, and which is great. So no, I really like Sorcerer. I think it's a good pick. It's not as high as some of the films that I put on my list for me, but I really like it.
Yeah, this is the most embarrassing episode I've ever been on. I also haven't seen this, and I probably will never watch it because it's been on my watch list, and the poster is like really kick ass. And if I watch it, I can't look at the poster anymore. So I have to make some sacrifices. Do the top 10 posters.
Oh man!
All right, Paul, let's go to your number 4.
I might have spoiled this with the shirt I'm wearing, but my number 4 is Dario Argento's 1977 film Suspiria. One of my favorite horror films of all time. Truly one of the great visually stylized movies I think ever made, especially of the 70s. I think it's got this great neons, and I think it really again it highlights sort of the crazed tension of these scenarios. The soundtrack by Goblin is like one of the movie soundtracks. I think I listen to that on its own all the time. I love how high toned the movie is. It's not really interested in being sort of narratively driven. It's just a lot of these crazy images and scenes that are sort of brought together with this loose connective thread. But there's a scene with this like kind of barbed wire situation that is like one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen. There's a scene with someone at a window that scares me every time I watch it, even though I know it's coming. I got to see this in the theater about a year and a half ago, and it's like one of my favorite theatrical experiences I've ever had. Again, it's such a thrilling and weirdly stylized movie, and it's got this weird mythology really to it that I think a lot of people don't really know about. But Jessica Harper is also like kind of incredible in the lead performance. I kind of wish that she was more of a movie star after this. But yeah, I mean, just great Italian horror, and I love the way it uses its aesthetic to drive home the story. It's more about using that aesthetic as its content rather than and sort of enhancing the content within it, because it's there's a style versus substance thing, but I think the style is the substance in this scenario. So I think that's why this has always been one of my favorite horror movies. It's so entertaining. I love going back to it all the time.
Yeah, this is definitely a very immersive movie. It's very sensory. It's just about looking at it and hearing it. I love the use of light in this movie. That could very easily be overdone and almost be like cartoony and cheap, but it works in this. And like you said, the soundtrack and just the cinematography is great, and the body horror, the practical effects, so much really good stuff. Like I sat and watched this, and I'm like, the story's not amazing. And this is another one. Like I kind of wish I could have gone into, because I think everybody at this point knows this, the secret to Suspiria, but you don't really find out until maybe the last 15-20 minutes what's going on. Kind of wish I could have went in fresh, not knowing that, and just seen if I pieced it together or not, and how that may have changed my experience with it. But yeah, I really like it. And again, it's nice. I think it's sort of like an hour and a half long, something like that. I found out today the remake is 2.5 hours long, which means
it's really interesting. It is a totally different movie. It is not. It is not really even a remake. I think that's almost a disingenuous way of talking.
That's what I've heard. It's more like inspired by.
Yeah. It's almost like the only thing is the plot summary. Yeah, it's the only thing that's the same.
The other thing I read about this movie was that Argento originally wrote, when he and his partner wrote it, they originally had in mind like preteen girls, like 12, 13-year-old girls. And the studio made them change it, or the producer made them change it because you couldn't get away with doing all this stuff to kids. But he did, so they made it, late teens, early 20s, but they didn't change the script at all. So, you have these, adult women talking in words that are originally meant for children, and I think that kind of adds to the feel of it. The kind of that
it's kind so of uneasy. Yeah,
it's just weird. Yeah, my only problem with it, like ADR, is a big pet peeve of mine. That took a long time for me to get used to, but otherwise I really enjoyed it. Everybody else wants Suspiria.
I've seen Suspiria, and but I watched it in high school when all my friends were trying to watch like the list of the greatest horror movies, and watching it with like a bunch of 17-year-olds who haven't seen anything similar and not trained to watch older movies that didn't quite have the effects. It was kind of just a joke to everyone else, with the like the monster arms that look like Muppet arms coming through, I think everyone was kind of finding it cheesy. And when no one else around you is digging a movie and having a hard time, it kind of taints your experience to be able to enjoy it. So I blame my lack of connection with the movie on my Philistine high school friends.
It's fun. Oh, go ahead. You go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, yeah, like what Paul said about the window, like the eyes, and it also comes up later in the scene, just the green eyes are just etched into my memory forever. And it's interesting what Kirk said about how it was meant to be sort of young girls, and they made it into like ballerinas, which traditionally have very sort of skinny, like small, petite, like statures. So they sort of kept that type of feel of it. And there's a scene with like termites that just creeps me out. And every time like I use a comb, I just like, I have to double check. It creeps me out. Yeah, this movie is brilliant.
Yeah, I loved it. It's funny Paul saying that because I the first time I saw it, I believe it was the same screening Paul's talking about seeing it on the big screen. We ran into each other there, and this was like I think we'd only met like maybe once, like at the Schmodown tape. Like I think it was like only one time at the studio, maybe twice. And yeah, so that was the first time I saw it, which was on the big screen, which I think it's definitely one of those movies that's so great. And I just think it's funny when you talk about the score and the usage of the score and the sequence that I remember. And obviously, there's all these great sequences of horror, but I remember there's this great sequence where she gets off the plane, and as she gets closer and closer to the doors, the automatic doors of the airport, it's like the music keeps cutting in and out. It's as if as the doors open, she's getting closer and closer to the horror and to that music.
When it cuts to her,
the doors
it's just like normal.
Quiet. Yeah. That to me is amazing, and I can't actually think of many sequences in any other film that kind of uses that idea of a trope of an opening and closing door, the score, almost as if we are traveling towards the score and towards the dread of the score. So I love that. I think it's a great pick. It's one of those things where for me, I really like Suspiria. The types of films that just wind up getting on. Maybe when I make lists like this, sometimes do tend to be a little more plot driven. Just for me personally. So that's why something like Suspiria doesn't quite get into where I'm making a list like this. But as a cinematic experience, I mean, it really was pretty incredible.
I was gonna say, like Paul said, the only real plot stuff comes in very, very late. So it's sort of, I rewatched it and it's like, I thought maybe just because of like the remake, it's like, it sort of happens the first 30 minutes. No, it happens late when it gets into the plot stuff. And there's also a scene with which
comes full circle at the end a little bit, which gets the doctor and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the scene with the blind man and his dog is brilliant. All it is, it's just, there's just a sort of faraway shot and then a close-up shot, and it's just a dog barking, and that's all you need for it to be absolutely terrifying. Yeah. The way he shots that is brilliant.
That sequence is incredible about the blind man.
Absolutely. All right, Paul, that was your number 4. So Zach, we're moving on to you. Why don't you give us your number 7?
Yeah, so my number 7, another Roy Scheider movie. It's the third one. Maybe he'll be our most appeared. Actually, is All That Jazz.
Oh yeah.
The title of my future memoir, All That Jazz, describes me. So this is a kind of a memoir, biopic, autobiographical movie that Fosse made about the life and struggles and his reputation as, maybe a musical genius, but also a womanizer and frustrating person to work with. I think it gets, I was reading some reviews and gets some bad rap for not going hard enough. And I think that comes from an outsider perspective that we view certain actions as punishable and nothing more. And I think it's more authentic coming from the persona because he's able to see, who's better to empathize with you than yourself. And you can see, the reality behind your struggles and your pains, and not that they're just, unrelatable or irrational. He's trying to take out his passion, but he never really learned how to, function as a friend or a relative or a lover because all his energy goes towards his, masterwork. But also the last 40 minutes, which just turns into kind of a dream sequence of him imagining his whole, kind of life and the people around him into a musical, kind of starting to acknowledge his, incoming death. and deal with it through the only way he knows how, which is musical form. It's really stunning. There's some great music. Ben Vereen's comes from kind of nowhere to just like lead the show, and it's very entertaining throughout. So I think it's the combination of a very resonant tale of someone's life struggle, but also just an engaging musical in a lot of ways. And some weird sexiness, and we talked a lot about how I like weird sexiness throughout the movie.
Okay, all that jazz I have not seen. I'm going to address that in a minute. Everybody else on All That Jazz?
I haven't seen it.
I've seen it, and I really like all that jazz. I saw it on the big screen, which I think is definitely a big screen movie. Just the use of editing and the grandeur of it. I think Roy Scheider is incredible in this movie. I think if I was going to say anything about why All That Jazz, I think it's one of the better films of that year, probably. But I think for me, why it wouldn't get quite as high is it's one of those great films that's kind of all over the place and a little bit self-indulgent. And it's sort of like, that's what makes it so memorable and so like impactful in different places. But then also there's my memory of it's been years, some scenes that there are moments of it for me where it sags a little bit, or it does spend 15 minutes on a sexy dance, or you're just like, whoa, where did the time go? But I really, really like the film a lot. So I think it's a really good pick, and I might feel differently about it. It's one of those films where I think if I rewatch it again, it would either go way up or maybe go a little down. I'd have to see it again, but I really like it. And what's funny to me and kind of sad is that like it essentially is a biopic of himself, and he dies of a heart attack, and then he does in fact die of a heart attack years after making this film. So weirdly enough, he made his own biopic. Like the ending holds up, which I think is sort of tragic and but makes it more interesting.
Yeah, this was interesting direction for a John Stockton biopic, but I'm not going to fault Bob Fosse. No, I'm kidding. I actually haven't seen this. I was going to try and see it. It isn't really streaming, like rentable or purchasable anywhere. I almost bought the Criterion, like sort of blind, but it was between this and another movie that I thought might be on Zach's list. I decided to watch the other one. Hopefully the other one is on his list, because if not, I totally made a mistake. But yeah, this is one I've been wanting to watch for ages. I love Roy Scheider, like one of my favorite actors.
He's amazing in this.
It took me so long to understand your John Stockton joke, and I'm widely embarrassed.
All right, Zach, you're number 6.
Were you going to address All That Jazz, Kirk? Or?
I know. I haven't seen it.
He's going to address not seeing it later in the future. He'll come back.
Okay. Oh, that's what I also was like. I thought he meant he was going to say something else after.
I haven't seen it, but I hate it.
And why he hasn't seen it. Okay, my number 6. I realized my whole 7 through 4 all has a strong basis in music, or music being a big part of the reason why I like it. Number 6 is Nashville.
Yes.
Another movie that can be called somewhat indulgent. This is the kind of Altman that I like best, which is when he's working within communities of people. It's not necessarily capturing any kind of plot or story, but capturing what the atmosphere is like amongst a community of characters. And I think he does a great job at making every character, even though you see them maybe 5 seconds at a time and they come back every 10 minutes, but they still feel so real and drawn. Every person you see on screen, I feel like matters or, has their own life. Even, the characters in the far back, they'll get a couple of lines to show that, they're part of this community as well. I think it does a good job at capturing, the country music scene of Nashville as well. It's something as a music person, I don't know too much about. So to get me a little more interested in, what that culture is like and, how big a scene Nashville has played in our music culture is really important. So just shining the light on, different communities is something that he can do wonderfully. And there's engaging stories. Lily Tomlin is amazing in it, and I think she's the heart of the movie. If there's any plot, you can find it with her and her relationship with whichever Carradine it is. I can't keep track of first names. Is David?
Keith.
Keith Carradine, yeah. I think so.
And the best scene is when he's playing at the concert and all these girls he's came into contact with think the song's about him. But when Lily Tomlin, you truly feel, it's probably not about her, but for the most, you feel her connection to what that song is mean to her and where she's in her life. And it's just nobody captures small moments, small character moments better than Altman. And I think this movie is a good example of it.
Okay, Nashville I have not seen either, and that's why I wanted to bring these both up together because these are both, like Paul said, movies that are hard to find. They don't stream anywhere. They're really rentable. I've been wanting to see these for a long time. I look for them a lot because I want to watch them, and Zach, you did a pretty good job of describing why I want to watch them. They both sound like really cool movies. I just haven't had a chance yet. As soon as I do, I will watch them. But everybody else on Nashville.
So yeah, I mentioned the whole thing with which one of potentially Zach's movies. Thank God this is the one that I chose. So this is a movie, when I first saw it too young. I saw it when I was, I think, like 17, where I didn't really have the capacity to appreciate the type of filmmaking that this is. So at the time I was like, I don't understand why people, hold this up as such a great movie from the 70s, blah, blah, blah. But I revisited. I actually didn't get to finish it this last time I watched it because it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. But I love Ned Beatty in this movie. I think it's an incredible kind of cacophony of these different performances and different people sort of coming together. That's kind of one of my favorite types of movies, the sort of Magnolia style of like all these different characters having their individual stories that kind of tie in together in a unifying theme. But yeah, I mean, it's a terrific movie. Obviously, Altman. Apparently, Michael's going to have like California Split or McCabe and Mrs. Miller on his list or something. We've all had Altman so far, so we'll see. Yeah, this is a great movie. I want to finish it, obviously. I now own it on Criterion, so that's great. But great pick by Zach.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, I haven't seen it. I've clearly been watching I clearly watched the wrong Altman movie.
No, I agree. I think this is a great film. This is one of those movies where it would probably be in my 11 to 15 range, and it's just I haven't seen it in I think 5 years, and so it's just kind of in that range where I was like, I don't think I've seen it recently enough to know if it's as good as I remember it being. It's like I haven't seen it since. And the thing about a lot of the movies that I think every movie but one that I have on my list going forward, I've seen multiple times, and a lot of them I've seen in the theater. And I think that's just Nashville's this one that I've seen once, really loved it, and for all the reasons that have been mentioned. But I just wasn't sure. I just can't. I can't get. It's so much of it in a good way. I think I've forgotten a lot of it in a good way, in that it's such a dense film. There's so many layers to it that I think it would be a near almost like watching it for the first time again. I think I watched it on my laptop too when I watched it. So I really want to. I know. Hey, this is years ago. I mean, so it's one of those films that I really love. Like I said, it's pretty solidly in that 11-15 range, but it's been a little too long for me to really know if it deserves to be higher or if it is where it's supposed to be. But a great pick.
Yeah, and Malcolm was right because you guys gave me a lot of movies to watch because there's a lot of crossover in your list. Okay, Zach, you're number 5.
I just want to say it's like we had a whole decade of movies to pick from. If we had a lot of so this is where we start to get very Zach. These top 5 are all very important movies to my life, and I wasn't going to deny what's deepest in my heart. I think people, because of my reputation, I think has been exaggerated a little bit, are going to be shocked at how low this is. But the true Richard Pryor masterpiece, number 5, The Muppet Movie.
Wow.
Film I've talked about Muppets all the time. The Muppet Movie, I talk about the Muppets 2011 a lot, but it's a very different vibe, and I think it's important to recognize that because the Muppet Movie is really the 70s version of the Muppets. They definitely are all high. The people and the puppets are all high, making this a good laid back attitude, and it's a hangout movie. And what's better to hang out with my best buddies, Kermit and Fozzie, and with the road trip, you just get to enjoy their journey, meeting all the Muppets and getting the game together. And there's nothing better than that. And that's why the Muppets 2011 was so successful, because they understood that the best part of the Muppets is just seeing them, get together and try to put on a show and be friends. It's like watching puppets be friends, and that's all I care about in my life.
Yeah, I really like the Muppet Movie. I went back and rewatched this with my family a couple months ago, and it was the first time I'd seen it in a long time. And I just love the feel of this movie. Just the courage to take the risk to make a kid's movie like that, and just that real melancholy that kind of perseveres over the whole thing. And just basically the characters are kind of losers, and they don't have a lot going for them, and they're probably not going to get that far in what they want to do. They're all you kind of get that feel that they all have these hopes and dreams that they're not quite going to make it. And to have that in a kids movie is so cool. And I think it makes the characters so much more endearing and so much more relatable and so much more likable. And I love, all the, you mentioned Richard Pryor, all the cameos are great. I think ever since this movie, they've been trying to recreate that. I don't think they ever hit just that tone and that sense of humor that they reached with these, bringing in all those different actors, different characters, giving them different things to do. They never did it as great as they did in this movie. And it's if you get a chance, watch the what's the show on Disney Plus about the prop guy. You know what I'm talking about, Zach?
I do not.
I forget the name of it. Kathy, message me the name of that show. Anyway, if you get a chance to watch, if you get a chance to watch that, watch it because it goes into the history of just like the making of Muppet movie, and it's really cool and really interesting. So I like that pick.
Yeah, so I actually hadn't seen this for a long time. My first Muppet movie was Great Muppet Caper, and I had seen 2011's The Muppets, but I know obviously Zach is very well known for loving this movie and this franchise, so I watched it for the purposes of the show. And I really liked it. It's got a weird, almost Altman kind of quality where you feel like there's scenes missing sometimes where the characters just kind of end up in one place and then they're kind of just in the other place and you don't really know how they got there. That's kind of some of the fun of watching the movie. I really liked it. It wasn't one that super connected to me. Again, it's just kind of a fun hangout movie. I think I like kind of a couple of other Muppet movies a little more than this one, but it's really fun. It's really great. I think it's interesting that it opens with Statler and Waldorf as like the first Muppets you ever see on the silver screen. I think that's such an odd choice, but I like the framing device too of them coming together to watch the movie and then they're watching themselves. I thought that's pretty cool. But yeah, great movie.
And yeah, Malcolm's right. The name of the show is Prop Culture.
I feel like we could have guessed. We should have been.
I'll just jump in and say I saw this when I was younger, but I have not revisited it. I'd have to watch it again because honestly, it's another one to be like a first time watch 100% because I'm like 95% sure because I think I saw all the Muppet movies at one point, especially when I was younger, and I've seen them all. But this one, it's been so long, so this actually does make me want to go back and revisit it because I really enjoyed the Muppets as characters and I really enjoy spending time with them. But yeah, the Muppet movie specifically, like it might be like over 15 years plus since I've even seen it. So.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it, and I watched it for this list like last week. I was like, yeah, it's going to be on Zach's list. And I liked it, like sort of like Paul. It's tough to come in like at this point in my life and just fully connect to it. I love the song "Moving Right Along." I think that's the best song on the soundtrack, and it's also really dark with the whole like frog legs and like Kermit's the main character.
Yeah,
like, it's a bit weird, but yeah, it's the 70s, man. Let's get crazy.
Charles
I think we need frog leg restaurants. I support Doc Hopper.
Wow.
Different frog, but like I'll eat me some frog legs right now.
I love the joke where they're like,
I feel like that was not the takeaway from the film.
Crutches.
That was not the takeaway of the
And the one more thing I will say about this, my first movie memory ever, like the first, if I go back in my mind as far as I can, first thing I remember watching is the giant animal popping out of that house, the giant headed animal. So that's
animal, right?
Yeah, that's so this movie's got a special place in my heart.
Animal from the film Sonic 17. Yeah, he popped out.
All right,
Very
Zach. Zach, you're number 4.
Hey, my number 4 is the documentary Harlan County, USA. Or as I typed in my list of Cody and Koho, Harlan County, ISA, which is a whole different all about myself. So Harlan County, it's a real personal movie for me. I come from a long line of coal miners, specifically in Kentucky and Southern Ohio. I believe on all 3 of my grandparents' sides, they were coal mining families above them. And so even though this is kind of an era later than what my grandparents would have went through and my great-grandparents would have worked for, I was still able to find such a connection to, their culture and their community and how important that, lifestyle and the union lifestyle was to them. My grandpa was always so pro-union. This helped me connect, where his, political mindset came from and how that sculpted him. I think, Appalachia can be a area often, mocked and joked about, and this movie handles it with such empathy and handles these, people that we can consider, lower class working people with such a humanity that you really care for them and what they're going through and what they're fighting for. And it's also important. I said the top 4 movies were all where music played a very powerful role. I think the use of music where they have some of the locals singing, union songs or folk songs that are then played over the scene as like montages player as you see other people, and it's not professional music they're using as their soundtrack. It's the locals, and it's one, kick-ass music. It sounds great, but two, because it's coming from some part of that community, you feel it so much more, and it's so much more powerful and sincere. That adds to the emotion of the movie. It's a great documentary, and I recommend everyone to watch it. Go watch it.
That's really cool, Zach. I did not know that because I come from 3 generations of mine workers. My dad, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. So I was surprised I'd never found this movie. No one had ever brought this to my attention because this is my this is my personal history. We're not in Kentucky. We were in Western Pennsylvania, but it was the same story. My great-grandfather, back in going back to the 1920s, fought to establish the original coal mining unions in this area. And my grandfather had all kinds of stories just how violent and bloody that got. And it was kind of devastating watching this and seeing the way these people lived and knowing that's exactly how it was back in the 20s, and this is still going on. And my grandfather and my father both fought those battles, especially this era. Watching this kind of made me emotional because I watched it like, that's my dad, that's my grandpa, that's my mom, that's their friends. I remember these people, being at my house, being a part of our lives. So I really, really connected to it that way. Specifically when they focused on the women and the wives, because that was my mother, that was my grandmother. I mean, they were on the news a lot because they got into a lot of trouble, just being on the picket line striking and, for the cause. So yeah, that's really cool. I want to go back and watch this with my dad. I want to show it to him and just get his take on it because it's very much like, there's scenes where the guys are going down and coming up. I remember him coming home from work covering that soot, looking just like that. I'm like, man, this really hit home for me. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to watch this. So it was, really good pick. Everybody else?
Me too, actually. I haven't seen it, but I'm interested. I'm definitely gonna.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible documentary. There was one doc I considered for my list. It wasn't this one, but I think this is very moving. It's pretty short, too. It's only like an hour, 40 minutes, if I remember. So it's pretty digestible. It's kind of the type of doc that I think people struggle to make now, and I think it's so grounded, and it's not interested in sort of being crazy high concept, is kind of just showing the lives of these people. And I guess it's a great sort of touchstone of sort of where American work culture was in the 70s and the 60s. So I think it's a terrific.
Cool. All right, that was. Did everybody else talk about this? Anybody
yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So that was Zach's number 4. So Brendan, we're on to you with your number 7.
Sure. Well, I went with number 7 with a pretty iconic film, but one that I actually got to see on the big screen for the first time last year, and that is Taxi Driver. Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. Yikes.
Okay, we'll come back to that one.
So then I go to number 6.
Yes.
Number 6, Barry Lyndon. Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, which I just think is awesome. This is another one that, and it's funny when I think about Nashville, it's like, I think when I first saw these around the same time, I thought Nashville was my number one.
Hold on one second, Brendan. I'm sorry, Brendan. Does nobody want to? Oh, Michael, you already yikes this.
He had it earlier.
You had it higher. Okay.
Well, no, Brendan had it. No, I mean Michael had it lower. And Brendan yiked it.
I yiked it earlier.
Sorry. Okay, I was looking for it on the list. I'm like, okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because Michael's your number. Was it your number 9?
Yeah, this is number 9. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brendan.
So, Michael, you can talk about it too. Then, after I'm done, I guess when I'm done. I think this is a great film, and this is one of the ones that I saw it on the big screen. I think 2 years ago, and it's such a big screen film. I mean, it's just the shots and the composition, and I think for me, why I think Barry Lyndon is such a great film is it's just such an epic journey with the character with Barry, and it manages to be like 3 or 4 different movies at once. It deals with war a little bit. It deals with him almost being a bit of a con artist. It deals with him, being almost like a spy, all these different things. And I think for me, what I think is really cool about Barry Lyndon is it's this period piece. yet I see in it, there's something quintessentially sort of American about it in like both all the good ways and the bad ways. You know, it's about this guy who starts in a very working class place, and through, getting more of a status and just through luck and through all these different things, he sort of climbs further and further up to the point where he has amassed wealth. And then it's, without giving away too much away, that's also the inevitable sliding downward of that, of the way that he handles it. And to me, it just, what's fascinating, it's kind of that classic arc, of a character, of what happens to people when they come from nothing and climb up to the top and then maybe misuse what they've done or not necessarily above board with how they achieve it. And so for me, it just fires on all cylinders. It's an engaging story. It's this long film that is long in the best way, and that it goes through all these different cycles and stages and feels like a really great journey. And yeah, it has one of my favorite narrators ever. It just the use, there's a narrator in it, and the usage of the narrator in it is so sort of funny, the sort of charming observations. And the narrator really injects, or maybe not even injects because it's there, but he enhances the sort of black comedy element of it, which I think is really, really great. And I think Kubrick in general, something that I've felt, and is that he's just an interesting filmmaker, and this film's very dark, but I almost feel like if you're not laughing, you're almost not like getting all of it, and this is a totally different movie, which I won't touch on because it's not 70s, but Eyes Wide Shut is like that, and other films that I really like, where it's like, if you're not somewhat laughing, if you're not seeing that there's an undercurrent there. And so for me, Barry Lyndon just works as a drama, as a black comedy, as social commentary. I love it.
Yeah, and this is one that I watched for the first time for this list. I feel like seeing this on the big screen would be like so overwhelming and intimidating. I'd love to see this on the big screen. And yeah, like you said, it's like he starts off as like an underdog, sort of everyman, and we follow him, and then he becomes the opposite, and he becomes the person that we all hate, like where he sort of betrays where he comes from. There's also sort of seeds of like revenge. One character goes away and then comes back in a pretty big way. There's a duel where this music in that scene is so tense, when it's just people, and at the end of the day, it's just people staring at each other, and it's like, it's just so tense. It feels like an action movie, but really it's just two people 10 feet from each other looking at each other. Yeah, it's brilliant. And Ryan O'Neal is with like, he's pretty much in. Is he in like every scene of the movie? With a few exceptions, he
got to be close to it. Yeah,
magnificent performance of being able to translate, like you said, like this journey, this sweeping tale of just the classic. It's basically like a hero's journey where he ends up becoming the villain at the end. It's brilliant.
Yeah, this was one I had not watched yet. It was one of only like 2 or 3 Kubricks I hadn't seen yet, and I was kind of putting it off, A, because of the runtime, and B, just because like the idea of the period drama. I was like, this could very easily be very boring, but it's not, because the character does not stagnate anywhere. He's always moving. He's always on kind of, okay, he's here, he does this, and he's on to the next thing. So the movie, even with that runtime, the pacing is very quick. You're not stuck anywhere for too long, and it's always very interesting. Like, he just, okay, what's he going to do next? Yeah, the character's great. Ryan O'Neal, I'm not a huge fan of. I kind of don't get his like big burst on the scene in the 70s. This is probably his best performance, but still, I think I don't know if he would necessarily be the best pick for this role. I read some stuff where there were some other people up for it, like
I think Robert Redford
was the first pick. Yeah.
I was going to say, I believe the story that I read, which may just have been in the IMDb trivia, is that there was a certain point where like he had to choose one of the 10 most
like the top 10
stars at the moment. It was like basically you can only choose these 10 guys.
Like,
Ryan O'Neal.
It was like Charles Bronson, Barbara Streisand. Like he was kind of limited.
Who could pick. Barbara Streisand is very limited.
Streisand is very Lyndon. That'd be good.
But I think he's not bad. I think the only problem I had with his performance is sometimes the accent kind of disappears a little bit. But other than that, he's solid. Again, it's almost like he's just there, like these things are happening to him. It's not like he's not really driving. It's just, okay, what's the next thing that happens to me that I react to? Which kind of makes it, an interesting character in and of itself. But yeah, I really liked it. The look of it is great. The cinematography, the way he shoots it to, so many of those scenes that just look like paintings, where, the only people moving are the people who have to be moving to talk or whatever. Everybody else is completely still. It looks like it was just a painting brought to life. A lot of really cool things to look at. Like I said, the story just keeps you going. So yeah, I'm glad I finally got to watch this. Everybody else, Paul or Zach on Barry Lyndon?
You want to go for a sec?
Yeah, well, I I haven't seen it, and I mean, it's been, staring at me a lot. And as Kirk said, really hard to want to put on a 3-hour period piece, especially with the 18th century, which we can all agree is the most boring of all centuries. Even though I'm sure I'd probably be really engaged. I mean, Kubrick makes, stunning, engaging movies. But just from the setup, from reading the plot summary, it's hard to, get excited about. So.
Yeah, I think John Alcott, this is like one of the great achievements in cinematography, like one of the 5 best shot films ever made, quite frankly. I think that him and Kubrick even made a new lens for sort of the weird fisheye wide angle inside, which I think Yorgos Lanthimos like tracked down the original camera to reuse it in The Favorite. This whole crazy story. I love the anonymity of Ryan O'Neal because he's not really someone that people have a relationship now. So especially like in 2020, I think if it's Robert Redford or someone you recognize, it sort of feels like it's them. And I like that it's this kind of person we don't really have a strong screen relationship with for the most part. I think this is an incredible movie. It is, again, like Brendan kind of mentioned, it's like weirdly super funny. It's kind of like a sort of PTH kind of thing where it's dark and serious, but it's also really funny. I love the sort of transition. Obviously, it has the 2 big acts, and I love the way that it totally flips the script in that second act. It's a really big cast, but I think everyone kind of comes in and is kind of chameleonic. I think it all works really well. They kind of are all orbiting around O'Neal, and I think that really works with the type of movie that this is because he is that central figure. It's an incredible.
All right, Brendan, your number. I think we're your number 5.
Yeah, so number 5 for me is Apocalypse Now, Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, which it's kind of funny. I've had such a roundabout thing because I think the very first time I ever saw it was the Redux. Actually, I wound up having the Redux DVD. So then I watched that and really, really liked it. And then I have watched the normal, sort of the original cut. And then funnily enough, I don't think this actually would have been all the way at number 5 if I hadn't caught kind of that re-release that came out last year. They re-released it, the final cut or whatever. And Apocalypse Now is just a classic example of that film that I always loved, that I always, like I said, it would have been that 11 to 15, 10 to 9 range. But seeing it in a theater, I was just like, oh man, this really is some all-time great stuff. It feels like an assault, and it feels dangerous in the way that I think that like the movie really needs to be to work. And I just not sure it can ever get there on your TV, no matter how big it is. It's just, when you watch this film, it's just the choppers. And of course the production has been, detailed of how sort of dangerous it really was and how so much was going on. And it just sort of, it just, when you see it on the big screen, you really feel it. And for me, I love these kinds of films. I'm trying to, think if there's another example, but just there's a journey, right? Because it's about Martin Sheen's character who is tasked with going down the river to basically kill and find Colonel Kurtz, played by Marlon Brando. And there's just something about this kind of film where you've got your character and they're getting closer and closer and closer to the end goal and to this final confrontation. And I think it has the best of kind of what we're talking about with Barry Lyndon, this kind of amazing vignettes, this journey, but in a very different kind of arc. It's this journey deeper and deeper into the darkness, and he's getting closer and closer to Kurtz. And there's just so many sequences that I find so incredible, and especially seeing it on the big screen, whether it's the nighttime Playboy Bunny stage where they're just attacking and rushing the stage, or the Rise of the Valkyrie scene, just so visceral and exciting. And you've just got so many great actors kind of doing what they do best. Robert Duvall in like 2 or 3 scenes is just incredible. And I just think Martin Sheen is so brilliant in this. I think he was one of the only people, I mean, I guess Brando wasn't either, but he wasn't nominated for an Oscar. And I just feel like he is this to me is one of the probably the best leading performances of the 70s. Maybe I haven't made that list, but like I'd have to go through it. I think he's just so tremendous in this. This is one of the great opening shots of all time. I remember even as a young kid seeing it. It's the beauty of the trees destroyed by the bombs of the helicopters. And it just, I just think it's such a terrific film. And it's just one of those ones where when you see it on the big screen, it just fully comes together. And I was just like, this really is, for me, not only one of the better films of the 70s, kind of all-time great. And I think that just shows how deep the 70s is, but I think it's all-time great, and it's like 5.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've seen this. I probably haven't seen this like 15, maybe 20 years. It's been a real long time since I watched this one. But I know I really liked it. It does a great job. A lot of war movies like try to convey like the violence of war. This one does a really good job of conveying like the psychological trauma and just like the pressure, what it does to your mind. Just watching everybody in this movie kind of like just waiting for you see if whether or not they're going to break. Just every character is just under that like constant stress and constant trauma, and I really like that about it. And like you said, just so many different performances, characters coming in. You got like Harrison Ford in for a second. You got you got Lawrence Fishburne in there for a few minutes. It's just maybe a little longer than that, but yeah, just a lot of great small performances of people just doing a really good job portraying that. You just kind of like emoting the themes of this movie, so to speak. So yeah, a lot of good stuff here. It's a good pick. Everybody else on Apocalypse Now.
In the truth of truth, this would be on my list. But once again, I was aiming for movies that I don't think people might really yikes. Like super cool, and so far no one has yiked me, so I'm winning. I believe that's what that means. But I love Apocalypse Now. It's my Coppola movie, my Ford Coppola movie of choice. Let's be specific. And I think it's the reality that is really what I vibe with. It is a real nightmare, and it really functions as a memory, the darkest of memories, and taking it from that and less of a, for lack of a better term, like factual or straightforward approach, I think helps you get the feel of what it's like to be in, that kind of situation, rather than a objective truth. And also just like jungle rivers are like my shit, and like you put river in a movie and a boat on that jungle river, and it's like automatic 9 out of 10. So Jungle Cruise 2021. I'll be there.
Okay. Do you want me to go? I got to see the final cut in theaters last year as well, and that was one of my favorite experiences because this is one of my favorite movies. The only reason it's not on my list is because I made the one director per movie limitation, just because being honest, this director would have had 4 movies on this list, so I wanted to sort of spread it out a bit. And I really love, and I'm glad you mentioned Martin Sheen, because he really just doesn't get enough love for carrying this movie, and especially his narration, the way he's able to convey so much, and just narration, just talk, is brilliant. And I just love the way the further they descent into this jungle and the river, that's so does Martin Sheen's character. I don't know, it's hard to talk about because there's so much text there. And one of my favorite scenes, by the way, the horrific scenes, is when, I can't even remember if this is in the theatrical release. It's when Kurt comes and he just hands Martin Sheen's character the 2 heads of the people that were with him when they're on the island. When Sheen is in prison, he just pops a head, and the way he's just terrified of it always creeps me out. And obviously the sequence with at the end is just awesome.
So this is where my decision to exclude certain films came into play, and I made a choice with certain directors that I knew were going to get brought up anyway. This is one of my favorite movies. I actually hate the Joseph Conrad book, Heart of Darkness, so this is a surprising thing where I was like, whoa, I love this take on this novel. It's crazy. Lawrence Fishburne lied about his age to be in this movie, which is a really cool kind of story where he sort of lied about being of age. Brando is kind of not even trying, but giving one of the best supporting performances of the 70s. Which is one of the most insane. Not the first time he did that, I guess, but it's crazy that he didn't know the lines, but was delivering. But could deliver that ending monologue, which is just so striking. It's a gorgeous, amazing movie. It should have been a disaster, which is the craziest thing about it. This should have been All the Pretty Horses or Heaven's Gate, but it turns into Apocalypse Now, which is just insane. So great.
All right, bring you number 4.
Yeah, so this is where I kind of had a choice to make, because there's a director that's going to pop up a couple of times here, and I was like, do I exclude these films? And I thought I'd rather just lean into it, because I think Coppola went on, in my mind, the greatest kind of run in a row of any filmmaker. I think he really did in the 70s, just in terms of consecutive films. And I couldn't leave any of these off. I wanted to talk about all of them. But for number 4 is probably the least talked about of his sort of 70s films, which is The Conversation. The Conversation is just terrific film. Gene Hackman playing a surveillance specialist. And, this is just, we obviously didn't talk about it because it got yikes, but talking about something like Taxi Driver, this is an amazing study of a lonely man, and a man who specifically the job of being a surveillance expert contributes to not only a loneliness, but a paranoia. and he's disconnected in all these multiple ways. The Conversation, I've seen it a couple of different times, and I just love these kinds of films. I love that slow, you fall into the specificity of his routine, of the people that are in his circle. And there's specifically a couple that he's surveilling in the opening scene, just a brilliant sequence that opens this film. And he's surveilling this couple and he's listening to them. And I almost want to not say too much, because a funny story about this, I actually watched this when I was really young and then rewatched it and I had completely misremembered the ending. So I got to enjoy sort of the wonderful ending of this film, which was a bit of a surprise and really clever twice, which was great. So I almost don't want to say too much, but I just think Gene Hackman's really terrific in this film. It's very contained. It's a very small, contained performance, but that's kind of those are the film performances that I feel like the older I get, the more I appreciate those kinds of film performances. There's so many big, bold, acting with a capital A performances that are great. Some that aren't, or maybe even overrated. But this is just one of those ones that I appreciate so much because it's so hard to carry a movie. Just going back to Martin Sheen, he does this so brilliant. He's playing crazy, and yet it's subtle and contained. And crazy can go bad, and it goes so right with Martin Sheen. This is a different kind of crazy, a different kind of paranoia. It's very small, and he's just so brilliant in it. And yeah, I just love it so much. I love that it keeps changing the way you feel about the central characters. Jean Cazale has a really great role in this as well. And yeah, it's one of those films where I don't even want to say too much, because I feel like it's one of those things where it's just good to go in and soak it up. And when you start talking about the specifics, I think you might tip where it's going, which is just, you don't want to know.
Yeah, you're right. Hackman's greatness, Cazale's greatness. I love Hackman. Just doing something. I can't put my finger on it when I watch just what he's doing, but just something different. Like you said, he's not crazy, but you've seen the toll that this life has taken on him, and he does that in a really subtle way, and it's really good. The other thing I like about this is how it explores that world of surveillance, the scene where they go to the convention and everything.
Yeah, the mundanity of it, right?
Yeah, just almost it's almost like this little subculture of surveillance, and I really like that about it. And yeah, you're right. The ending is fantastic. Everybody else on the conversation.
Okay, so this is the movie that made me change the direction of my list. Originally, I had 3 Coppola in my top 5, and I watched this because this was my first time watch for this list. And I was like, okay, I need to change something up just to be different. Because like I said, this is the first time watch, and I loved it. There's this weird I'm not gonna go into specifics, but backstory with Hackman's character where you're not quite sure if he what he's running away from. Is he actually a bad person and he's just on the other side of the country, or is that just part of the job? And the last 20-30 minutes, it turned in a legit horror movie. There are some scenes where it's really graphic, and I was legit a bit scared. Yeah, like you said, Brendan, I couldn't say it by myself. This is brilliant.
This is a sad story. Me, Michael, and our friend Jake I actually had bought tickets to see this in the theater the week before COVID happened, so that is a really sad fact. That will forever remember me, this movie. But no, I mean, it's incredible. I think it's great how you see him socially distance himself as well. You see this woman who's trying to pursue him, and he's just so not engaged with her at all. She's trying to talk to him, and he's totally zoning off into the distance. I love how it takes the one line, obviously, as you guys know who've seen it, and reinterprets it and changes sort of what that means sort of over time, and what that means at one point and another point. Again, the 70s has something about these enduring final images. This is obviously one of the most famous ones. I won't spoil it if you're not familiar with it, but it seems so simple, and it seems like kind of a dry story, but it just grabs you and pulls you in, and it slowly sort of sneaks all of these terrors and fears inside of you. I think it's so interesting that Hackman went on in Enemy of the State to ostensibly kind of play the same character. It's sort of tied to it, kind of a legacy sequel kind of thing. But yeah, it's a terrific movie. Imagine this being your 4th most acclaimed movie of the decade. That is insane. And pumping this out the same year as Godfather Part 2 is crazy.
So when I was about 13, my parents sat me down and they told me all about the birds and the bees. And so I decided I didn't need to hear what Francis Ford Coppola had to tell me about why I was feeling that way inside and where babies come from. So I decided to never see it.
That was your conversation.
On a different note, while you guys were talking, I was so proud of this bit I was creating in my head, and all I thought was I've never been happier with the joke about to come out of your mouth.
Well, that was the twist that we weren't trying to give away. That the whole time the conversation that this couple is having with their child. You just spoiled the whole thing.
I also started like, wait, don't people call it the talk and not the conversation? My whole thing, and I just decided to go for it.
I think you're right, but I was with you the whole way. You never said that. I was with you the whole way, so you're right. It is the talk. You were so convincing that I was like, yeah, the conversation.
All right, Michael, let's move on to you and your number 7.
Yeah, so this would, if I was making an actual list on Letterboxd or something, this would be the second film from this director, but it's one that's a bit under the radar from this director. This director had a pretty big movie from 1976 with All the President's Men. I decided to go with his one from 74 called The Parallax View. I know there's another early one he had that might come up later. So obviously All the President's Men was about Nixon and the Watergate sort of scandal. This one sort of takes aim at the JFK and the Warren Commission findings. At the very start of the movie, in the first 5 minutes, a politician is assassinated, and then we sort of jump cut to 3 years later. We sort of see that it was done just by a loner gunman who's crazy. We jump cut to 3 years, and we see Warren Beatty, who's the star of this movie. He plays a reporter called Grady. Grady or Freddie? I'm going to call him Warren Beatty. Yeah, Freddie. He tried to find a conspiracy within this. You sort of get the sense that he gave it his all, and it sort of destroyed him and probably destroyed his life. And then we see someone come to him, and this is all within the first 10 minutes, by the way, so I'm not going to spoil too much. She notices that a lot of the people who were witnesses to this assassination have been dying in sort of weird accidents. And at first he sort of laughed it off, and then, again, not spoiler, but she dies, and then that's when the movie sort of kicks off. And the way it sort of holds a mirror up to the government say, we see them say, this is just Lerner. They sort of absolve themselves to just they just give all these stats about how we did 11 months of investigation. We spent 12 weeks in the courts, blah, 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 blah. And then they just come and say, it was just a person working on his own, because they want to present to the public that, they're in control. There's no conspiracy in the 70s. You're talking crazy, as if there'd be a corrupt government. I mean, come on, who are we kidding here? I just love the way it captures the 70s paranoia, and it sort of brings the Warren Commission's, the 60s distrust, and brings it into the view of the 70s. Warren Beatty, there's not really much in terms of character, because this is a very plot-driven movie, and you're not quite clear on what Warren Beatty's motivations are. Does he just want to be a big shot reporter who gets nationally known? Does he want revenge? And I really love it. I've seen it twice now. The reason I chose this, even though I like All the President's Men better, that's one of my favorite movies, it's a bit under the radar compared to that movie, so I decided to go with this one.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite Warren Beatty, probably my favorite Warren Beatty performance. He's really good in this. I really like all the set pieces, just like all the different places he goes, all the things he has to kind of go through. Hume Cronin is great in this, and his little role as his boss, and just the relationship they have and the role he plays is pretty cool. My only problem with this movie, and I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil everybody has it, but you find there's a kind of a secret revealed in this movie that you find out what's going on, and it doesn't really get explored. And I kind of wanted to go. I mean, I would have let this movie be. I'd been fine with this movie being half hour, 45 minutes longer if it had delved deeper into that, into that thing that was going on, because it's there and it happens and then it's just gone. But other than that, it's a great ending.
The ending got punched.
Yeah, the ending is fantastic. It kind of it kind of comes full circle on itself with all the stuff you were talking about, all the conspiracy stuff. It's a really solid political thriller. Good pick. Everybody else on?
It's one of my favorite 70s political thrillers. Michael kind of alluded to it earlier. Higher up on the list, I actually have a better one called Captain America: The Winter Soldier on my list. So stay tuned for that one. But no, it's a great, phenomenal movie from one of the essential directors. As Kirk can tell you, I originally had Clute on my list from Alan J. Pakula, which is another one of his 70s espionage movies. Decided the last second to go against it. The music for this and all of Michael Small's 70s scores are like immaculate, like one of my favorite composers of all time, bar none. I love Kenneth Mars in this. He's like the former FBI agent. Such a compelling performance. But man, this is just perfect. Pakula knows exactly what he's doing in the 70s, which with this corporate and public and political espionage. And yeah, I mean, can't go wrong with kind of any of it. This, All the President's Men, Clued, all that stuff is all phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, I think you can't go wrong with any of those movies.
Yeah, I'm sitting here. This is one of those ones I have not seen. I think it's probably very high on my list of like 70s films I just have not seen yet for whatever reason. So yes, the whole time you're talking, I'm going, ooh, please don't say too much because I really do. I've been wanting to see this for a while, and yeah, and it's funny just to bring up Clute, which I saw recently last year, is definitely close to making my list too. And so yeah, just hearing that this is on your list and that this is people are speaking so highly of this makes me want to get to it even quicker. So yeah. This is exciting, but I haven't seen it, but I'm interested in.
Yeah, I also haven't seen it. The theme of the day, I may not watch movies. I think I but I definitely thought this was a sci-fi movie for like 25 years of my life. Paralyzed, it's a fancy word. So I haven't seen it.
All right, Michael, your number 6.
Yeah, my number 6 is an Australian film called Wake in Fright.
Ooh.
So this is about a teacher who he's supposed to just stop into a town called Bundin Yabba. They call it the Yabba. Everyone in the city calls it the Yabba. So he's supposed to just stop over for one night and then fly out. And then he sort of gets into a gambling. He has a bit of fun. He wins a lot. And then he does that ultimate gambling move where he goes home. He's looking at his money. And he decides to go back for one more. And then he loses it. And then from there on, we're like it's just one man's descent into madness and hell. This town, the way this town works, like it's an outback town. There's sweeping landscapes of the outback of orange sand, yet you literally just cannot escape this town. It feels so claustrophobic. He tries so hard to, so I should say it's played by Gary Bond, who plays the teacher. It also features Donald Pleasance, who is just giving 120%. He's going crazy. The way, like I said, it's just one man's descent into madness, and you're either on this journey with him or you're not, because this movie could lose you pretty early, and if it does, you're not going to enjoy. I mean, you're not going to enjoy it if you love the movie, but this it's hard to talk about. But I will also give a trigger warning. There is, if you are interested in this movie, there's a scene where real kangaroos are being shot, and it's pretty violent, pretty gruesome. This movie's not for everyone, but if you are on this journey and you're in with John Grant, the teacher, I promise it's going to be rewarding, because it's just so visceral and raw, and this town, you just cannot escape this town. That's Wake in Fright.
Wake in Fright I have not seen. I just found out today that it's on YouTube. If I'd known that earlier, I would have watched it. But it looks crazy, and I want to watch it. It looks like it's kind of right up my alley. Donald Pleasance looks amazing in it. Like, I just watched a couple scenes with him, and he looks like he's kind of crazy. But yeah, I mean, like, it just has, I don't know, like, there's like a scene. I saw a scene real quick. I was just watching a trailer. Like, it looks like a guy's fighting a kangaroo, and all kinds of really weird stuff. So I definitely want to check this one out.
Yeah, so I did. This is apparently directed Weekend at Bernie's and First Blood, which is kind of wild. Again, I haven't seen this actually, but it sounds insane and kind of like the kind of movie I really like. So
I actually have seen this pretty recently, actually, and I was so excited when you said it because I think it's such a great movie and it's such a fun movie to get to talk about. And it's like you said, the sequence that I remember of it is he's in this town. It starts right, and he's very much in the outback. You know, it's like he's very secluded and nowhere near any kind of life at all. And he's teaching these kids, but it's very secluded. And then he goes to this town, which sort of almost resembles a small town, but isn't totally secluded. And the sequence that I always remember is there's a moment where they play. Is it the Australian national anthem officially that they're playing, or is it just the anthem of the town? Do you remember this, where they're saluting? There's this amazing sequence. Yeah, where they're all playing the gambling.
I can't remember if it's the actual.
There's a killing sequence that is just incredible where they're in these gambling, and it's so loud. They're in a bar and everyone's pushing up against each other, and you hear the machines and the gambling machines, and then it's time to like salute the troops and salute the country, and everybody stops, and like the lights go out and it's red, and everybody just stands completely still and listens to the entirety of this song, and then it's like it never happened, and it's one of the most chilling sequences, and it happens right at the beginning. And it just sets the mood so much if it hasn't already. And it's just incredible. It feels like something almost out of like a 1984 or something. And yet the movie is not at all about like a different society than our own, but it just bizarre. And the game that he gets involved in, I was not familiar in, which I believe is like, you just have to
flip a coin.
The coins just have to come up. Yeah, it's 2 coins if I remember. It's like you flip 2 coins and it's like, so there's something amazing about this game, which is almost even more ridiculous than even most things that people gamble on, and yet people are shoving money in. It's unbelievable. And it's hot and it's sweaty, and it starts almost has like this almost like After Hours, like the Scorsese film vibe, like this guy sort of tumbling into one night, but it's not a one night film. Then it sort of settles into a very different groove and a different vibe with the Pleasance character. And I think this is a really, really cool film to watch. And it's fun. I think I watched it later on at night. I think it's a fun one to throw on like 10:30, 11 o'clock, just because it has that sort of like it's surreal, and it's like that bit where you're kind of already a little tired. It's just the perfect time to watch it.
There's also this was like lost for like 30 years, and they actually found a print. The editor found a print in Pittsburgh, and then he was able to restore it, and like that's how we get like this high def new edition that was released in 2009. So that's sort of why it's been under the radar, because it was like legit lost.
Yeah, and it is unique in that it has these sequences of kangaroos being shot that are real, and there's like, which is disturbing, but it actually was done in conjunction with the society and like to raise awareness about the horror of what was happening to these kangaroos. So it's got to be one of the first times I've seen that in a film where they're using this actual disturbing footage, but not flippantly. It's specifically to sort of raise awareness.
It's not rapping, that's what you're saying. The kangaroo is not rapping in a dream sequence.
Well, I don't want to give it away.
Zach, have you seen this one?
I think you're muted, Zach.
All right. When I do my marathon of Australian mammals getting shot, which I'm about to do soon, I'll watch it. It'll be top of my list.
I always like to say, I feel like this works well. Ted Kochev, I feel like weirdly this, First Blood, and North Dallas 40 is like a weird trilogy of like masculinity that I think is like interesting. For like, I think that's sort of an interesting. They're all the same director. I think that's sort of interesting. I watched them all around a similar time actually, and I think they're sort of like, I don't know. I have to really watch them again to be totally eloquent about it, but I think there's something really interesting in those 3 films.
Yeah. All right, Michael, you're number 5.
So my number 5 is another Australian film called Walkabout. This is from director Nicholas Roeg. It is released in 1971, I believe. It's basically, so Walkabout refers to in Aboriginal culture, like 16-year-old Aboriginal will go into the outback and learn to survive for a couple of months. That's not the sort of center of the story. The main part of the story is a father takes his 2 children out to the outback, and he tries to kill them, as you do. He turns out he can't do it, so he turns a gun on himself, and then he kills himself. And now this she's like 15 and like a 6-year-old boy are stranded in the outback. And obviously we see it's not really heavy on plot, and that's basically the only plot. And they just have to try and get back to civilization and survive. And along the way, they meet this Aboriginal boy. And it's tough because it's sort of like a sort of experience. There's a lot of clash of culture. There's like man versus nature, white versus black, like suburban versus outback type of things going on here. There's also wrapped in a coming of age story. The girl and the boy they share a pretty visceral like first attraction to each other. This is the first time they've ever had these feelings. There are some really impressive cuts, like edits to like sort of nature as other things are happening, and you can sort of pick what you want from that. I would love to see this in the big theater in a big screen, because this is one of the most beautiful films I've seen. Yeah, there's so much to talk about, but it's also hard to talk about because there's not much in the way of plot, and it's hard to describe. I find. Yeah, I just love that it's wrapped in a coming of age story that connects to me at this point in my life. Maybe in 10 years it'll be different, maybe not. And yeah, I think it's just to also experience your first love. And there's a scene in the end where the cultures really clash, where you see this sort of white suburban teenage girl. She is presented with a situation where the boy does something that is natural in his sort of culture, and it sort of goes south. And I think that's sort of the heart of the movie right there, if you want to know what Walkabout is about. Yeah, that's Walkabout.
All right. This is one I also haven't seen, but based on these two movies, Michael, what is happening in Australia? Like, really crazy stuff. Like is Mad Max real? Did that really happen? Yeah, this is another one like I looked into because of your being on your list. Another one I would definitely want to check out. Anybody else seen Walkabout?
It's been on my Criterion watch list forever. Just haven't gotten around to it. I mean, Nick Rogue is just one of those guys that I think like I've not really delved too deep into his filmography. I've only seen like 2 of his movies, and I would love. This is like one that totally seems like the kind of thing that's my kind of movie. Just haven't gotten to it yet, which is kind of It's weird to say.
Yeah, same. I haven't seen this either, but I liked all the Nicholas Rogue I've seen, so it's definitely on my radar. But I haven't seen this one. So.
He sold it really well too. I thought Michael's description really made me want to watch.
Yeah, I'm more interested in it now than I was. So is it still on Criterion? Because I do know it was on there at one point. Yeah, it was on there. I did almost watch it at one point. So it's I got to get back and do it.
I am kind of on the opposite, to where Man Who Fell from Earth is just like not for me, to where it makes me a little hesitant about Nicholas Rogue. I'm sure one day I'll pick 1971 as a marathon year, and Michael will be happy to pick Walkabout. This is an inside conversation, but it'll happen.
Don't Look Now. That's the Rogue. Just go. That one is good. Yeah.
All right.
I haven't seen The Man from Earth, but Don't Look Now.
Hey, Riches. That's my shit. That was like, of course, it's my shit.
All right, Michael, you're number 4.
Yeah, here's where we get into the sort of generic stuff. My number 4 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Obviously, another film that, like, what can you say about it hasn't already been said. Just one of the all-time classic horror movies that is so raw and gritty and slimy. You feel like you have to sort of take a shower after watching it. I love that, except for the very, very end, or at least one part at the very end. It takes place just on a hot summer Texas day, and it's all in bright, like sort of under the sun, and yet it's still absolutely terrifying. Leatherface, played by Gunnar Hansen, is just absolutely terrifying. He's also the noises he makes, like the physicality he brings to the role, is pretty spectacular. I'm really excited. But yeah, and it also features one of my favorite character introductions with Leatherface, where you're not really expecting much, sort of just for this character walking into a house, and then just out of nowhere we see Leatherface and he's gone, and that's all you see of Leatherface for sort of that first little moment, and you're like, did I just miss something? Like, is there like a scene of this movie that was removed because I have no idea what's happened? That one of the shots that always, and it's probably like one of the most famous shots of this movie, is that you're following this character Pam as she's walking up to this soy house, and immediately you can tell something is off. This is a big white suburban house that is just in the middle of nowhere, and you're like, please just turn around and walk away. Like, it'd be easier for everyone if you just walk away. And of course she goes in, and that's how we get the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, this is one I haven't watched yet. It's kind of, I'm on the fence. I want to see it eventually, just because I want to have seen it. But there's just certain things about it, and it may be assumptions I have. But it's just the kind of horror that I don't like to watch. Not that it's like poorly made, but just me personally, it's like the stuff I've seen, like even the stuff I've seen, like scenes I've seen had an effect on me where I'm like, I'm not into that. But that's just personally where my line is. I'll watch it eventually. Just haven't kind of like worked up the courage for it yet. But everybody else on Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen this either. It's like a big one. I just like this. I've not actually sat down and watched this. There's a couple. I mean, it's funny. Horror, funnily enough, was for whatever reason when I was younger, like 13, 14, 15, was not one of the genres that I went through the list of all the big ones. So it's just kind of, as I've gotten older, I've just been crossing them off. Like even the original Halloween, I saw probably quite a bit later than you'd think. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see this one, but I actually haven't seen it. I just got to step away for 1 second too. So you guys talk about it. I'll be back in just 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the great horror films ever made. It's like terrifying, and it's the slow dread that really like you just can't escape it, and it feels like it's sort of this gravitational pull pulling you into that horrifying feeling. It's really beautifully shot. Weirdly, there's the stuff with the sunset that's being shot, and like on such a small budget, it's such an achievement. I think in filmmaking, like not just in horror, but in general, like as a film, I think it's such an amazing achievement. One of the best films in the 70s. Just one of those things that I guess for me, like I think of it more as all-time great than personal favorite, and I think that's sort of what delineated it from being on this list for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of on Kirk's side. I've seen it, but it's not the type of horror movies that I tend to really go for. As in, watching a group of teenagers be killed one at a time. The like kind of real life serial killer kind of horror movies. I think because they exist more in a reality, for some reason it's hard to escape it. And I think it, even though it's in reality, it still creates a disconnect in a weird way. But on a different, I actually prefer 2. I think 2, expands out of reality and it's just like balls to the wall crazy. I appreciate the craft rather than finding the enjoyment. I think if there's a political and thematic depth that I think was resonant, I know he was going for something, but and I might blame this on being a different time period. I think the depth and the themes might have been more felt in 1974. Am I right? Than today, when our political landscape has evolved greatly since what it was like then. But now I feel like it was only the themes only existed in its head. It didn't really come out on in the text. Also, Leatherface as the iconic horror movie, I think or character is a mistake for the movie, because I find the hitchhiker and usually whoever plays like the second lead so much more terrifying. That scene is my favorite. Seeing the van. And it's so much more terrifying than I think anything Leatherface just, wailing around in the saw makes me feel.
All right. We are going to get into. Did everybody get to talk about that? Did we miss anybody?
Yes, everyone. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're going to get in top 3s now. Before we do, I'm going to give a shout out to everybody in the chat. Malcolm, Stardrew, Redshaw, Brooklyn, Scott, Nazario were in here. TWOHIG. Chase was in there. Everybody else still watching. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. We're getting top 3s now. And Paul, we're going to start. And the way we'll do top 3s is everybody give their 3, everybody give their 2, everybody give their 1. So Paul, we'll start out with your 3.
Yeah, my 3. This is kind of a trademark sort of personal movie for me. One of the defining actors of the 70s, and I think my favorite collaborator with this actor, and that's Bob Rafelson and Jack Nicholson in 1970's 5 Easy Pieces. This is essentially a story about a man who used to be a concert pianist, and he sort of left that life to sort of live a more simple life. And I think he's got this sort of simple girlfriend. And I love that it explores the way his character is sort of totally disconnected himself from all social engagement. He refuses to engage with his family. He has this girlfriend that he kind of treats really terribly, and he's kind of a terrible person. And he never really is able to speak about the things that are bothering him until he's with the person who can't speak back to him. And I think that says so much about his character, that the only person he really airs out all his dirty laundry to is someone who cannot have that dialogue back and forth. But the scene where he plays the piano in the house for the first time, and it's slowly panning around the room and showing the family history and all the photographs, is perfect. This is an incredible Jack Nicholson performance. Obviously, the most famous scene is when he's yelling at the waitress in the diner, which I love, obviously. But I think it's so much more than that. And I think the ending is such a perfect ending. It's wordless. There's no really dialogue that needs to be had. The character just makes a decision that I think is more true to, I think, what a lot of movies would have done in that situation. And I think it sticks to who the character really is deep down. And I think the way that he has been defined through this entire film, I think it's such a striking, incredible movie. It's so simple and quiet and patient, but I think it's such a good character study, and it lets the character come out through his interactions with people, and you learn more. Instead of just explaining who he is, it shows you by the way that he behaves with different people. It's incredible.
I'm just shocked we're in the top 3, and this is the first time Nicholson's come up for best 70s movie. That's crazy. But yeah, this is a great Nicholson performance. It's a great character. There are a lot of great scenes. I love the scenes where he's on the back of the truck playing the piano.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just a lot of really really cool, memorable scenes like that. You know, like the diner, the trip with the girls in the back. And yeah, like you said, he's a very well defined character. I just wish, and I've only seen it once. Maybe there's something I need to go back on rewatch. Maybe something I missed. I just wish I would get more of, we don't get much of a backstory of why he's like that. It just he is, and this is what he does. I just wanted a little more out of that from the story itself. But other than that, like I said, Nicholson's great. It's not the Nicholson movie. There's a couple Nicholson movies I put on a list above this, but it's still pretty solid. Everybody else on 5 easy pieces.
And so this, I feel like it's right up my alley, and I've been dying to watch it for a long time, and I was ready to watch it to prepare for this. I knew it was important to Paul, and instead I decided to watch the Phineas and Ferb movie, and sometimes you live to regret the choices you make.
Yeah, I really like this film a lot too. Actually, it's a film that interesting in that he is disengaged from a certain way of life and is living this more blue collar kind of existence. And I think what's cool for me, at least when I watched it the first time, is I actually didn't really realize where it was going. So it started, and I thought, okay, he's this blue collar guy. He's sort of a dick. He's got this relationship with Karen Black, the girlfriend. And it's a movie that I kind of want to watch again because it's a movie that I really, really, really like, but that I sometimes have a sort of a suspicion that I might like it even more now that I can watch it kind of knowing the full picture, because I kind of loved its journey. It's one of those films where I think I kind of thought I'd figured it out about 30, 40 minutes in and what it was. And I was just appreciating Nicholson's performance and I was loving it. And then when I started to see where it was going, and it's one of those great films where you don't quite, it's not 1 hour and 20 minutes in. It's not what it was 30 minutes in, and it's a very slow burn, the way that it sort of unveils the sort of levels of this character. And I really, really, really liked it. And I think it is actually top tier Nicholson performance for me. It's probably like one of his top 3 performances, I think, for me. I just think he's really, really great in this and hits a lot of great notes, and he's funny, and he has a lot of the qualities that we love about Jack and other films, but there's
He's got great hair too, which is rare for back in the 70s.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great pick. And it's one that I definitely want to watch again. I almost want to watch again in theaters. Like, it's one of these ones I might wait until, but the minute I have the chance to see it in theaters, I think I'm going to jump at the chance to do it.
I actually I watched this for the first time last night because I sort of assumed it'd be on Paul's list, and I was like, I sort of watched everything from my list, so I bought it on iTunes, and yeah, it is fantastic. Like Paul said, the two like sort of standout scenes in my mind are when he plays the piano and it sort of pans around to a character's reaction, and then the conversation he has at the end, which sort of floored me. Like it's so emotional and raw, like that he's just laying it all out there. And like you said, the ending of you just hear this like massive log truck just changing gears, and like it's so brilliant the way it ends. It's really fantastic, yeah. And it's got bowling, and any movie with bowling is fantastic.
The most intense bowler since Walter Sobchak.
All right, Zach, hit us with your number 3.
Yeah, my number 3, I'm pretty sure based on the life I live, there's no movie that connects more to how I live my life. That is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Really speaks to the time that I drowned kids in chocolate rivers and had to go through a horrible lawsuit. It's a Zach pick. It's like a weird ass kids movie with a lot of Rumsey and June Wilder doing crazy shit. And as Kirk was saying, with Muppet movies, kids movies that have a sense of melancholy, I think help them exist just past your childhood and help you find a new way into it as you grow up, and when you see it as an adult, help still connect to it, and not in just a nostalgic way, but because there's a difference between being nostalgic for your childhood and being able to have new revelations about what childhood is. And I think this movie can help even adults, view the, darkness of being a child with, how your curiosity and your greed and all these other emotions that are so broad in the movie can impact the nobility in the route a child can, and also fucking candy. It rules. Actually, I don't like candy. I'm just going for a bit. I like chocolate. But Roald Dahl, as I said, Witches was my shit. I'm just a huge Roald Dahl fan. And I know he was
As a
not
person, right? As a person.
we go to the pub every night. No, he's dark people can write great shit, but his sense of humor, and dark, absurd take on childhood really, I think, impacted how I see life and how I also outlet my own creativity. Anything that I write for fun has a lot of influence by Roald Dahl. So probably one of the biggest influences in my creative soul is Roald Dahl.
Yeah, I just like you. Yeah, you're right, Zach. This is the movie like you have to put on nostalgia goggles to enjoy and ignore all the lousy crap. Except for Cheer Up Charlie, which we all fast forward. But the rest of the movie is great. I love how much just off the wall stuff is in this movie. The beginning before you even get to the action, like the search for for the golden tickets. It's like, lady, did you hear what I said? It's your box of Wonka bars, your husband's life. How long will they give you to think about it? I love that stuff. Just so many little things like that all through the movie. And then Gene Wilder shows up, and he's obviously fantastic. Not really much more new stuff you can say about his performance, but he's just really great, and just how sincere he is. There's a lot of wrong ways you could play that character. We saw the remake, with Johnny Depp did. There's a lot of ways that character can go
Golden
wrong.
Globe nominated performance.
Exactly, and but he just so spot on with it. Just how real he is. Just like how dark and scary, but innocent and childlike at the same time, and just above it all, just no, wait, come back, stop. That stuff is just so great. And the kids are all good. They're not maybe fantastic actors, but the characters are really good. And it's just a really fun movie, great movie. Willy Wonka. Anybody else?
I'll go. This is a movie that everyone sort of has the movie where when it's a rainy day or a substitute teachers and they just come in and put a movie. This one was always played for in my classes, and so I sort of can't be like you said, I sort of really have big nostalgia goggles for it. I love it. I love Gene Wilder and it just brings me back to my childhood, and has talking about character introduction scenes. This is one of the best. I just love it.
Yeah. I haven't seen this since I was really young. So as far as the specifics of the movie, I can't really speak to it. But the specifics of just that story, I think, is great. I mean, I really am. I've read the book, and I'm very familiar with the story of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate, whatever, however you want to say it. But yeah, I'm really familiar with it, and I think it's great. I just like the whole idea. I remember even as a kid, the whole idea of the golden tickets thing is so exciting. The idea of it being hidden somewhere, and he's such a great character for us to go on the journey with, and all the characters of the kids, and they're such creative, interesting characters, and their punishments are very at times horrifying but creative. And just for the specifics, specifically to really take in Gene Wilder's performance again and stuff, I really need to rewatch this. But I really, really like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory as a story and as the experience.
Okay,
Here we go.
So outside of Gene Wilder, who is great, I think this movie's pretty bad. And I prefer outside of the lead performance, I do prefer the Tim Burton version of the story. I think that the way it approaches the story as this sort of I think that movie is actually way darker than this. This has the one scene where it's the creepy when they're getting on the boats, but I think outside of that, it's not really that dark. People kind of overplay.
If by way darker, you mean pedophiliac? Then yeah, I agree.
Again, Willy Wonka himself aside, I think the kids are terrible in this movie. I honestly, the core ethic of the whole story, why he gives it to Charlie, doesn't really make any sense. I think Violet Beauregard obviously should be running the Chocolate Factory. That is so clear to anybody with common sense. But I don't like the way that this movie's designed. I don't really like the way that the sets are created. I just don't think it has the right look. And again, the characters are just, besides, again, Gene Wilder's great. If it was just Gene Wilder, awesome. But there are these other characters in it that I just don't care for and I'm not engaged with. I think it's poorly directed too. The pacing is really here and there and kind of wonky. But yeah, just not really my thing.
Grandpa Joe, man, one of the best characters.
I'm actually, part of me wants to go back and watch this and the Burton one again, just in close succession.
Deep Roy in the Burton one is amazing. Deep Roy, incredible performance.
Yeah. I see. My memory of the Burton one is actually more like I have more specific memories of it. But yeah, I wouldn't mind going back and watching both of them again because especially the Wilder one, it's been so.
Charlie just sucks as a character, by the way. So he's terrible.
Whoa.
Yeah, Paul hitting us with the first oof of the night. All right, Brendan, give us your number 3.
I'm going with number 3. Like I said, I am going to break the Coppola train in a minute, but it's another one I really want to talk about, which is Godfather Part 2. I really, really love Godfather Part 2. And to me, it goes to the structure is so fascinating to me. The idea of this really showing the father and the son. I think so many movies deal with the sins of the father and the way the father impacts the son and all that different stuff. But this is the film that really does them at the same time and lets them be echoes of one another, with obviously De Niro playing the younger version of Vito, and then Michael being Al Pacino. The main reason why I love it, for me, Al Pacino in this, one of the best performances of all time for me. Specifically in the first 2 Godfather films, but I think this one is really the one where just his performance to me, like this could be my favorite performance of all time. I don't know if I want to go there right away, just because I'd have to go back through all film history and make sure, but it's definitely one of them. And I just love this film. I love, so many stories, and whether it's, Canada or whether it's, US, it's these stories, these immigrant stories, right? These stories of people coming from another country and sort of the way that the work that they do, in this case, it's, it's criminal work, but the work that they do sets up their kid to do something else, and whether it's building on what they do and whether it or going another path. I find those themes really, really resonant and really, really interesting. So I'm a big crime movie fan in general, and for me, and there's films I've watched, that don't necessarily always live up to the hype, so it's a bit basic to put it up near the top, but I just wanted to talk about it because I just think it's a great film. It's great performances. John Cazale, this is, I think, his best performance of the few great ones, that have been done, that he had this great small window of great performances. And this for me is my personal favorite. I love all the new characters that get introduced as well. The Hyman Roth character and all these different things. And Diane Keaton is great in this one too. I could go on all day about it, but for me, it's the structure is just so fantastic with these two sort of parallel rises. And yeah, I think it's great.
Being right isn't basic, Brendan. Don't let them ever tell you different. No, I love this movie. Obviously, anybody who knows me knows how much I love this. The way this movie's set up, my favorite part I think about it is not the opening scene, but the opening of Michael when you see them at the confirmation. I love how it's juxtaposed with the wedding scene from the first one. The wedding scene, they're surrounded by family. It's very Italian. Everybody's happy. And in this, at the confirmation party, it's they're surrounded by strangers. It's very waspy, and everybody's miserable. And
it's so cold.
Yeah, and then you have Frank Pentangeli show up, who's just like a ghost of that old world coming back to haunt Michael. And that he's probably my favorite part of that movie. I love that character so much. And just in, like you said, the parallel with De Niro and his rise, just how that's juxtaposed, and just see everybody gets darker. You see, it's funny because they're more criminal in the first movie, but it's almost like they're better people. Here they're cleaning themselves up, but they get worse as people. So yeah, this is a great movie. So again, everybody's heard me talk about this, so I'm not going to go too long. Everybody else on Godfather 2.
This is one of my favorite movies of all time as well. Not going to talk about too much, but there's one scene, is the moment that I always love and I've never forgotten, is when they're in the office, Michael at the office. There's one, I think might be the senator. He points at Michael, and you look at Michael, and his eyes, he just looks at the finger like, you sure you want to point your finger at me? Like, do you know who I am? Mm-hmm. I just love that. I love that moment so much. I know that's a really weird thing to talk about, but is The Godfather 2? It's so great.
Yeah, so obviously, again, like I mentioned, I made the decision not to put Coppola stuff on here. I knew we would get to talk about it. Michael is the Clemenza of my life, so shout out to young Clemenza in this movie. But no, I mean, it's a great movie. I think the K confrontation with Michael is my favorite scene, maybe in any Godfather movie. For me, like, as great as the scene is and as great as the performances are, I think, like, the De Niro stuff I just don't love as much as I love being with the family, with the Corleones. That is the stuff I always find most compelling. So that's why, like, Sicily is probably my least favorite part of one, as great as that stuff is. Like, and that's why sort of being away from them and just being in that inert world, like, I understand why it's there. Obviously, it's an incredible narrative device, but I think, like, I love the other stuff so much that whenever it cuts away, I'm just a little disappointed. But I mean, it's great. Lee Strasberg, legendary acting coach, getting like his only Oscar nomination, which is like such a cool thing. Yeah, I just want to. I love when Kay is talking to him when they're dancing, talking about like, oh, you told me it was going to be 5 years. That was 7 years ago, and all the little details. The way that the movies come together too, the closing of the door and the opening, that stuff is masterful. Gordon Willis. What else can you say about this movie? It's immaculate.
Yeah, Godfather Part 2 would be my Godfather of choice. I think part of it that hurts me is I haven't seen it in 8 years. I have seen The Godfather more recently. And also, to be honest, there is a little voice in the back of my head, you know, that wants to be unique and be different. And I think that unfairly, like, affects my ability to connect to The Godfather because I don't want to be a basic bitch. But, like, as sometimes being basic, it means you're right, and so I got it. It's my own flaw that I got to get past. But I think that's really why it's on my list.
And the drapes. Why were the drapes open, guys? The ultimate question.
All right.
Who opened it?
I think we're on to Michael for your number 3.
Yeah, this is a guys from earlier. It's Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, which I can't remember what number it was for Brendan. But
I think
yeah,
it was
obviously
7, but it might have been yeah.
Obviously, this is another film that when you talk about the 70s, you have to mention Scorsese and De Niro, and this is my personal. It's tied with Raging Bull for my personal favorite. It's my favorite of this from the 70s. It's obviously it's a classic story. One man's descent into just. I mean, not even descent. When we first see him, he's crazy. And some of the things he does in this movie, you just like sort of leave you with a blank face. You're just like, wow, he really took her to a porno flick for the first date. I love that. Also, this movie is like a pretty damnation of like the Vietnam War and like PTSD. And this is one of my first movie obsessions. When I was like 15, 16, I used to like, and it was like off school. I'd wake up at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. and just chuck this on just because the opening of this movie, it sort of lulls you. The score by Banana, it's so soothing and calm, and it's just like that classic jazz. And then all of a sudden, from there to where we end up, and he's like trying to assassinate somebody, it's spectacular. It's one of the defining 70s movies, and I could watch it anytime. I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, Brendan, this was your 7?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I mean, we're talking about it's like the best performances of the 70s. You do, you know, I'm kind of going through them, and we're going through, you know, Martin Sheen, Apocalypse Now, Al Pacino, you know, in the Godfather films. And to me, De Niro in Taxi Driver, this is my favorite De Niro performance. I just think he's so terrific in this. I think it is so scary. There's things about it that are sympathetic. But to me, what's so amazing about this is it's so real. I mean, it's so real in a character that feels unpredictable and feels different. And yet De Niro grounds it so beautifully. The score, this is one of those things like we talked about with the conversation where every scene has that atmosphere. There's something about the atmosphere in every scene that just kind of grounds you in it. And I think what's kind of interesting about Taxi Driver is it's almost like two different movements in a way. Like the first part of the movie, well, so much of it gets paid off later, focuses on a different character. You know, there's this whole thing with Sybil Shepherd and Albert Brooks that isn't as relevant in the end, but then it becomes about Jodie Foster. And I think what's cool about the movie is that it's that consistency of directorial tone and the work of De Niro and just that the score that I just love. Even though it's not comfortable, even though he's not likable, there's something great about sinking into this movie. You know, when a master is so in command, both the actor and the director, there's something wonderful about that.
Yeah, anybody who knows me knows I love gross 70s New York, and it doesn't get more gross 70s New York than Taxi Driver. Yeah, this movie is so good. Just that atmosphere. I feel like when I watch this movie, I feel like I can smell it. Like it's just the atmosphere is just so overpowering. And yeah, the great thing about this performance is like he's scary, but there's also like a banality to it. Like he's just like you said, he's uncomfortable. Like it's just somebody you wouldn't want to be around. Not necessarily because he's dangerous, but because he's so awkward, just so painfully awkward. Just so many of those scenes like where he takes her on the date, and he's trying to talk to her, and he calls her on the phone later, and he just doesn't get it. And it could be, this movie could have went a completely different direction and not had that like violence. It could have just been just like this completely antisocial outcast who doesn't do anything because you're not sure. Like, it's the thing, like when you first watch it, you're not. Which way is this guy going to go? Yeah. And it is that final descent that kind of he falls off the edge at the end. But just like you said, exploring that character and kind of something about the performance brings you on board, even though you don't want to be, and you're like, you want to look away, but you can't. And that's great about it. Yeah, the score is so good. It kind of reflects just the rest of the feel of it and like his mentality. And just a beautiful movie. Good pick.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, Todd Phillips has never been better as a director. Really just amazing what he did with this film. No, I mean, yeah, this is kind of the peak of that sort of man in a room ethic where it's this guy disconnected from the world and letting his mind wander and wander and wander and expand into these crazy different heights. Leonard Harris is like a pretty underrated performance in this movie as Palantine, as a character we all are familiar with by name. But yeah, I mean, it's just terrific stuff. Every actor is phenomenal. I think it goes, again, these ebbs and flows. Travis's interactions with different types of people, too. It's not just the same people over and over again. You see how he is with one person versus how he is with another. Funny story, apparently when I was like 8, I had seen this movie somehow, and I used to do the you talking to me thing in the mirror a lot, according to my parents. So I don't know what that says about me as a person. But yeah, I mean, just phenomenal performance, and it looks gorgeous, I think, too. Like, that's kind of one of the underrated things is how good this movie looks. Well, not good, but how impressive it looks. And it's just, I mean, what are you going to say? It's Taxi Driver.
Yeah, I think you, Paul, should have went with a Queen Latifah joke instead, but
I was close. Danny DeVito. I was like really right there.
I know where your humor goes. I was waiting for this Queen Latifah, and I love Taxi Driver. I think the main reason it's on my list is because it was my number one last week for duos with Robert De Niro and Scorsese. It's between this and Goodfellas, fight for my favorite Scorsese. I would say my favorite De Niro performance, Mean Streets, just because I like the Live Wire performance. It's something you don't see that much from De Niro, and I just tend to be drawn to those kind of characters. But Taxi Driver, I do want to talk about the cinematography since it was just brought up. And Michael was talking about how the score is kind of relaxing. Even the cinematography at points, especially when he's driving the cab, even though it's so grimy and dark around, just the haziness has like a relaxing, calming effect. The kind of put you in a daze before the reality and where his darkest of minds goes starts to hit you and bring you back into the griminess of the earth. So it's a great movie, great choice. You're a better person than us, Michael.
All right, on to the twos, and Paul, start with you with your number 2.
Not a movie I expect anyone else to have. This is a hyper-personal movie to me for so many different reasons. And that's 1979's Breaking Away. It's directed by Peter Yates. It's about 4 young men who come together in Bloomington, Indiana. That's, of course, where I went to college. And that's the college is the setting that I'm an alma mater. But it's such an incredible story of these outsiders of this world and how they come together to become something that they couldn't be on their own. The lead character, played by Dennis Christopher, Dave Stoller, is like such a charming, effusive man that I think like anybody would be hard pressed to really dislike. He made this weird decision where he suddenly wants to pretend he's Italian to everyone, including his parents. He speaks Italian at home. His dad absolutely hates it, which is like one of my favorite bits in the whole movie, which comes around at the very end to like a very hilarious conclusion. But it's so inspiring how this movie sort of explores them as people, and also that they become athletes and they enter into this bike race. And it's both a sports movie and a coming-of-age movie, which are 2 of my big interests. And I love the dynamic between these people. I love what Dave does to sort of woo Katerina, as he calls her, which is this girl that goes to Indiana, and how that sort of resolves itself in the end as well. great. I mean, Dennis Quaid is giving a really cool. It's like this kind of disillusioned jock who kind of was obviously like a star athlete in high school, doesn't know where to go with his life. Jackie Earle Haley, Daniel Stern, kind of underrated in this movie as like kind of the forgotten friend of the bunch, but I think he's phenomenal. I love them together. I love the way the music is handled. The climactic scene of the race is, I think, rivals almost any sports scene. It's such a great underdog story. Yeah, it's amazing, and it's such a perfect portrayal of the town of Bloomington, Indiana, which is somewhere that I spend a lot of my life. I love the way that it shows all the different places, how the city has changed over time. It's just one of my personal favorite movies. Always will be, probably. It's not necessarily will be a favorite for everyone, but I love it so much, and just got all these colors that I love.
Breaking Away, I've not seen yet. I found today a really crappy bootleg on YouTube. So I started watching. I watched a little bit. I think like the first 10 minutes of the movie's cut off.
Like the quarry kind of thing.
Yeah. So it was. I got to see a little bit. What I saw, I liked. I'm kind of intrigued by this. Just the idea, like you said, that coming of age and sports. Coming of age could go wrong for me. So the jury's out on this. There might be some stuff that doesn't do it for me. But the cast, it looks like there's a lot of, like you said, early roles for a lot of these guys. So yeah, this one I definitely want to check out. Looks like a lot of fun.
And by the way, but this director, I also made a choice to only pick one. Otherwise, I would have had at least one other film from this director probably on my list at some point.
Sure. Anybody else on Breaking Away?
Yeah. So
okay. You go.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Just let Zach go since he's the most negative, I think.
Okay, so I saw this 2 years ago because of Paul, and he sort of gave me his Amazon Prime account, which I could still use. I can't do it anymore because they sort of cut that off. So I saw the only reason it's on my list, one, I knew Paul would have it, and two, I haven't seen it in legit 2 years, but I do love it for a lot of the reasons Paul mentioned. It's got coming of age and sports, two genres I really respond to, and I just love the Italians. I love that whole sequence. It's so funny. Yeah, it's really good. And like Paul said, that the ending, that sports is just edge of your seat stuff. It's brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I want.
Nope.
Oh, I think
did he freeze there? Oh, is that he froze for everybody?
He's gonna trash it anyway.
I can go because I watched this for the first time a couple of months ago. Actually, I think maybe 3 months ago, and I thought it was great. I mean, I didn't consider it for the best of the decade, but it's definitely one of my favorite films of that year. I think I just think it's, for all the reasons Paul said, all the performances are great. The four kids are great together. They have great chemistry. They're all different in ways that feel authentic. They're not movie types. They feel like authentic kids that are just different. I love the atmosphere of the town. There's a particular sequence, where his father, this Christopher character, and his father are walking around, and his father talks about how he built these buildings, and then he's now not high class enough to sort of engage and be in the buildings, and just the way he talked about how it's like he built the buildings, then they became too good for him. And that just hit me. I just thought, wow, I mean, we've seen films deal with class in that way, but there was something about that scene that really, I thought, I was like, I'll never forget that scene. It's very, very funny. It's really well directed. There's a real beauty to it. There's a real tranquil quality to it, and it allows the moments of humor. And there are these moments of humor that are not broad in a bad way, but they are funny. He's really obsessed with Italy, and his father is very mad, and it's big and it's funny, but it's all in that same key. It never breaks its tone. It never breaks its vibe, which feels very grounded. And yeah, so I think it's a really wonderful film. I really enjoyed it a lot. And I watched it with a lot of my family too, and everybody really enjoed it. So yeah, it's great.
Doesn't he, when he's on the date, doesn't he also speak in the Italian accent as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing? It's great.
Yeah, so I watched this under Paul's request and through blackmail. I was required to watch it.
This was months ago. This
I
was
watched it in March for the year marathon. I promise there's no collusion. I have a guilt complex. I just want to please everybody. I did not collude.
You disavowed the allegation.
I was fairly underwhelmed by it. I found the Italian thing a little corny. And I feel like there's other characters that had some more complex lives I would have been interested in, being the protagonist instead, especially like Dennis Quaid's character, had a lot of internal conflict about where his life was leading or not leading, and kind of being stuck as a townie. And I think they kind of just forget to explore those supporting characters' lives. I feel like it's set up as a ensemble movie of young friends, but I don't feel like it cares enough about them for me to follow.
I feel like he's a good like lead, though, everyman lead, as opposed to like the real quirky side characters of the group of friends. It's like having the whole movie just be about them could also not work. So I think like his name's Dave, right?
Yeah,
Dave.
Dave.
Yeah, so I think he's a good everyman lead. Like that works.
Fun fact about this movie: they're the big underdogs in the movie, but now in real life they're like the winningest team in Little 500 history because that race goes on every year. And now they're like dominant. Like they recruit people like from all different kind of things. They won the race like the last 2 years in a row. So it's like a funny thing where like it's such a different context now. But, yeah.
That's cool.
All right, Zach, you're number 2. What's better than Breaking Away?
Well, obviously, but for Breaking Away, it's All the President's Men. Classic choice. I'm a sucker for journalistic movies. I feel like watching a journalist go through the grind of uncovering the information they need and getting their story is, probably more engaging than most detective stories. My True Detective is journals. There are real heroes out there today. I think, Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford have all the, charisma you need to make, watching them, ask questions and write stuff down and type and be on telephones to make that engaging. You have to have the star power to make that, work. And I think the pacing of the story helps you keep really engaged in the mystery of the plot, even though we all know what happens. That's the magic of what movies can do. Sometimes you forget that this is, based on history and that the ending, because you're still like, how is this going to turn out? It's about how are they going to find out the information they need and get the answers. And, when you can make interviewing a bunch of people, lightly related to the incident, so, revelatory and exciting. It's a feat, and I could watch this movie every day. I just find it, this and like Spotlight, just journalist movies are so watchable to me, and I could watch it, every evening.
See, I'm on the opposite end of you, Zach. I'm really not into like procedurals, be they journalistic or whatever. I'm not at like Spotlight. I really never connected with this movie. I did not expect to like, and I really did. And it rides on the the power of Redford and Hoffman. And again, here we are in our number 2. So I think it's the first time either of them have come up, which is kind of crazy to me. But yeah, it's the two of them. They're great, and especially Hoffman. Hoffman's fantastic. And that ending, the ending of this movie is so good. That final scene is just mind-blowing, just how it just sits on it forever. I love that so much. Everybody else on All the President's Men?
I'll go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm like I said, I would have had this on if I was making just like a proper text list. This would be on my list. I'm a big Watergate junkie. Like I really love movies that are about that and sort of the 70s sort of government. I also love Dick, the Kirsten Dunst, Michelle Williams movie for that reason.
Oh, the movie.
Yeah. And I also like Zach. I'm a big fan of journalist movies. So this hits right in the sweet spot. And like Kirk mentioned, the ending sits with me forever. I love it. This is brilliant.
Yeah.
This is pure 70s.
Yeah, this is one that's been a long time since I've seen. I've just saw that it's available on streaming here, and I'm going to probably rewatch it soon. I really, really eager to rewatch this because it's just been a while. I mean, this is one of those movies I watched when I was, I think maybe like in my early teens, so it's been a while now. And I really liked it when I saw it. Hal Holbrook is also great as the Deep Throat character. And yeah, I'm really eager to go back and revisit this one and see, because it's just one of those things that I really liked it when I was younger, but now it's been so many years that I'm excited to go back and see where it would rank for me. Now that I'm watching it, because it's just been so many years and so many movies in between. But I loved it when I saw it. I was totally engaged by it. Loved the performances. Loved the whole pacing and atmosphere of it. But I really want to rewatch it to really be able to talk about it in a more present tense.
Yeah, I love the tactility of this movie. I think especially the sound design is some of the best sound design that's ever been done. I think like the click clacking of all the typewriters, all the people talking in the background, that stuff is so well layered. I think that Pakula is one of the directors that best understands how to make sound design present but not make it overwhelm the dialogue. You can still understand what Redford and Hoffman are talking about. I think that Robards is amazing in this movie. Like him as Ben Bradley, to me, like that makes Tom Hanks look kind of bad because when you compare the two, it's just not comparable at all. There's like 10 Oscar nominees in this movie too, which is insane. Like one of the most insane casts. But yeah, Pakula, one of my favorite directors of the 70s, as I mentioned earlier. This is probably his best movie. I think I like Klute a little more, but it's kind of neck and neck. Redford and Hoffman are both immaculate. I think I actually prefer Redford in this, using his movie star persona to make his character sort of be that presentable face that's like the friendly guy that kind of gets them into these different situations, where Hoffman is more kind of weaselly under the radar. But yeah, I mean, amazing movie. There's kind of a movie that there are no flaws. It's crazy that in the year that this movie came out, what won Best Picture is still kind of crazy. Even though I kind of get it, but it's still kind of blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah, shout out to Jack Warden just because he's my favorite that guy of all time. Adore him.
All right, Brennan, your number 2.
Yeah, well, I can't now remember, but it was a Yikes from earlier, which is Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven. Yes, and for a lot of the reasons why when we were talking about Badlands, for a lot of the reasons you were saying about that, like that is also why I think Days of Heaven works, in that it has all the beauty of Terrence Malick's direction, the free-flowing camera, the dreamlike atmosphere, this connection to nature and to the land, and yet also in a story that I think would be really, really compelling on its own. It's about these two, this Richard Gere and I believe her name is Brooke Adams.
Brooke Adams.
Brooke Adams. Yeah, who are working for Sam Shepard. And actually, what's cool is I'm from Alberta, and that's where I am right now, and actually filmed in Alberta where I grew up. So that's cool. It's beautiful prairies. It's one of the most beautiful films ever made, and it's just this house in a field, essentially. I mean, it feels very secluded. It feels very separated from society. And I don't even want to say too much, because that's what's cool about Days of Heaven, is it connects you to the land. It connects you to sort of, it's a child's almost memories. So there's a dream-like remembrance. Talk about Apocalypse Now being like a dark memory. This is like a memory as well. It has that similar feeling. And but the story is interesting. I mean, it almost resembles, there's something almost, I mean, it's a totally different tone, but it has almost the machinations of a Coen Brothers plot, in that they engage in something that is deceptive, and then it doesn't quite go the way that they expect. And so what's cool about it is that it has that kind of engine underneath it, and yet it couldn't feel more different from any kind of thing like that. They're sort of conning this guy, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels artistic and connected to nature, and it feels as if, what I think is really great about it is Terrence Malick always seems to be distilling the narrative that he's working on. He seems to be taking it to its most basic, raw core. And when you have something like Days of Heaven, which I think is such an incredible story to begin with, it really does achieve a unique power in this story, and that it does feel like a really interesting story, stripped to its bare essentials, stripped to its rawest emotions. And I saw it for the first time in a theater. Like, it's one of those movies that I'm not sure if I just seen it at home, if it would have the same, if it would have the same feeling. Maybe it would be a little lower on the list. But for me, I've only seen it the one time in the theater like 4 years ago, and I still remember it as being so impactful, so overwhelming visually, while also having a story that I really hooked into and was excited to see what would happen next. So yeah, I'll be interested to see what happens whenever I revisit it. I'd be interested to see if it goes up or goes down or where it is. But for now, my memory of that in theater experience, it's that high for me. I loved it.
Yeah, so this is my number 9, I believe. Mm-hmm. I want to give a lot of credit to Linda Mans, who's the little girl who just recently passed away, actually. She is astonishing in this movie. Like, I was stuck between two different Brooke Adams 1978 movies, as Michael might know what I'm referring to. But yeah, this movie is insane. They shot only for like an hour a day because he wanted to be during golden hour the whole time, which is why the whole thing has such a serene, relaxed atmosphere. It's one of the most beautiful movies ever made, I think. The soundscape is so gentle and simple. There's not a lot of overly complicated stuff going on, but it strips the story down to its core, and it has just these. It's really just the 4 people living this life, sort of really disconnected from the world. You could almost not even really tell when it's set, aside from a couple, obviously, of certain things that happen here and there. But it's just remarkable. Like the house is just this image of total disconnect and isolation, and it sort of lets these people's relationships really be pushed to the forefront and become the most important thing. It's got a really like really moving ending as well. Like the last 20 minutes are really striking. I love how it kind of comes full circle to that very opening. Great narration, as kind of all of Malik's great films do. It's just a striking, beautiful movie. I just watched it for the first time recently. I watched it twice in the last week, 2.5 weeks. I wanted to make sure it was good enough to make the list, and it's remarkable. It's only like 90 minutes. It's so good.
Yeah, it's short too. Yeah, which is funny because it feels like epic almost.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say about this. I watched this for the first time this week because it was on both of your lists, and that's what struck me. This feels like a 3-hour movie told in 90 minutes, and I mean that in a good way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think another filmmaker could have made this a 3.5-hour movie, and that would not be good. I love the fact that the beginning of the movie, that Foreman's dead in like the first 20 seconds, he's on the run, So that could have very easily been like a 45-minute part of the movie. Like, we didn't need anything. There's a real economy of the story here. We don't get anything we don't absolutely need to just get that one story that's happening with these characters. Paul, you mentioned the narration. I really like the narration of it. That could very easily not work, but I think her narration, the way she talks, it's so real and so natural and so sincere that it really does work. I really enjoyed it. I think the only thing I don't like about it, I'm not a Richard Gere guy. I think if you give Richard Gere anything to do besides be slightly charming, you're asking too much of him. I really, really love to see another actor in that role. But I think other than that, it's fantastic.
Alan Shepard is so good, though. I think that it almost kind of doesn't.
Yeah, Shepard is really good.
Yeah, Seb Shepard's really goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was really a this or that for me. I just chose Badlands over Days of Heaven. It could have went the opposite way. No specific reason. But it's a beautiful movie. Both visually and poetically, and I'm sorry, it's getting real late and I'm losing all train of thought. So I'm just gonna go with I love the movie. I wish I could have the experience to see it in theaters like Brendan did, and maybe one day it will happen when there's actually theaters. So
yeah, it's so funny. I'll say it. What's so funny, I realized I forgot I was going to mention is that there was just this really amazing time where I was living like near this theater that was showing all these old movies, and I saw, weirdly enough, Carrie, Badlands, and Days of Heaven all around the same time. So it's funny they're on your list. Like, it was just a really lucky window where I think they were doing a tribute to like Jack Fisk, who I think was the production designer maybe, or something like that. Or so I made you speak of school, but it's just funny that they were both on your list because they're all just such great films.
I love that in LA, they're doing tributes to like production designers.
Yeah, I think it was in New York actually. It was in New York.
Oh,
I
okay.
was there for a few months, and they were doing it at the Museum of the Moving Image, and yeah, it's like I think it was. I might be speaking out of school. I have to see someone have to look it up, but I think he may have had a relationship with Sissy Spacek, maybe, or maybe I'm crazy. But it's interesting. It was a very interesting person to be doing tribute.
Yeah, I saw this for the first time like 2 weeks ago too, because I for consideration, it's one that I've always wanted to see, so I rented it from the library. And then like two days later, Paul said that like it's probably going to be on Brendan's list because he loves that movie, so sort of got lucky. And yeah, I mean, you guys have said everything correct. I agree with. And there's the scene where all the bugs show up. That is just like you could put that on a portrait. That's to see that on the big screen would be incredible. That is like literally, I just can't forget that image out of my head.
Movie houses ever.
Yeah.
Too. One of the beautiful movie houses.
I feel like this is there's like a lot of biblical imagery here, like with the bugs and just like them being on the run. It felt like an Old Testament story almost. Just very, very, like you said, like very, very short, but also very epic.
Now it's very much into that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Michael, keep it going with your number 2.
Yeah, I mean, this is not really surprising, me. This is sort of like this swaps between this and Almost Famous swap between like my favorite movies. It's 1978's Halloween. I'm gonna have Halloween on this list because I'm Michael. I really can't be like objective about this movie. This is like one of my first movie loves. I still have the old DVD from when I was young. The way Carpenter is able to do so much and with so little it just never fails to like blow my mind. There's just in broad daylight, he's just following Michael in the car, and that is just absolutely terrifying. That's all you need. Like the opening scene, the opening sequence it's one of the greatest introductory scenes I've seen because it tells you all you need to know. It's just this little boy who just has nothing and just killed his sister just because like there's no reason given, there's no reason needed to be given. And Michael he's one of my favorite characters. Like, obviously, I'm a huge Halloween franchise fan. The way Nick Castle like plays him, as just the way he moves, it's like he's moving, but he's not giving any thought to where he would go. We could turn right, turn left. He just happened to stumble upon Laurie, went up to his house, and that's how they happen to come in contact. And he's like, you look like someone I could probably kill, so I'll follow you around. And I love this like little callbacks where you meet Laurie's friend's dad, who was like in the police. They meet at like a convenience store that had just been robbed, and everything they mention is all the things that Michael later comes up would use, like a knife and things like that. And yeah, I mean, this is just one of the best horror movies of all time. The way Jamie Lee plays Laurie, she's so wholesome, so nice and pure, and obviously that's like really plays into the whole horror genre about, you know, the virgin, so to speak, and it's just terrifying. And like the concept of like the boogeyman with these two little kids, it's just it's Halloween, man. Like, you can't really say much that hasn't been said.
It's actually September 2nd. But...
Well, in Australia, it's Halloween.
I just saw this for the first time a couple years ago, and I think it just got hyped up for me so much, especially the character of Michael Myers himself, because I'd seen some of like the sequels, and it was just weird to like see him driving a car, and you know, stuff like that.
It is funny that like he's in like mental like a institution from like 5 to 21, and then he learns how to drive stick shift like manual.
Exactly. But just like I mean, and I think he's one of those characters. I think like all these iconic characters like develop more in the sequels. And in this one, it's just like it like I'm like, you know, okay, he killed his sister, he's in the mental institution. Doesn't really explain why he's unstoppable, why he's like this, like, you know, this
Donald Pleasant will explain. He'll explain it 10 times within 10.
Yeah, but I mean, like, he says it, but like,
he's
it's like
a walking exposition machine.
Yeah, exactly. And I was really surprised how easy it is to just kind of stab Michael Myers and put him down for a minute and run away. Just like I just keep that coat hanger, just keep stabbing him and running. He'll never get you. But yeah, again, there is a lot of cool stuff in this, and I like Halloween movies. Like movies about the holiday Halloween. I always enjoy that aesthetic, and I think that's done really well here. But like I said, I think like just the mythos and the character was too hyped up for me going into this, so kind of, you know, lost something for me. Everybody else on Halloween.
Yeah, so I was talking to Michael about this. I recently found my VHS copy of it. So when you mentioned the DVD, I was tempted to kind of run over and grab that. But no, I mean, this is, a phenomenal movie. One of the best scores of any movie, like horror or non-horror ever. It's so iconic at this point. I think the POV stuff is really scary still. Like, I think that stuff actually really holds up when you're looking at it from the killer's point of view. Like, that's such a weird place to put you in. This is, I think, one of the first movies that really does that. This and Black Christmas, I think, kind of put you on the point of view of the killer. I think that's such a fascinating visual style. This is so simple. I love that I like Kirk saying he wishes there was more to it. I kind of like that it's so bare bones that you don't really know much. That mystery is kind of what makes it scary to me. Sort of the ultimate, again, he's the ultimate boogeyman in the sense that you don't understand why he's there or what he's doing, but you just know that he's coming after these people and they're kind of getting picked off one by one. I love, you know, again, Laurie as a character, the way she fights back is really great. This is an amazing horror movie, one of the great defining horror movies of all time, let alone the 70s.
Yeah, yes. Oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
So along the same lines of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it is where I like can appreciate the craft, but then also be, you know, confounded with what is the craft for? You know, what's the point? I guess to scare, but once again, that is just not a way I react often in movies. So it's hard for me to understand where people get that reaction from. Just watching, you know, people be stabbed is not something I find terrifying or need to be watched. And once again, I think if there's some more thematic depth that can, you know, last outside of the 70s, then maybe I can find a way into that movie. But without that, I don't see a purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I do really, really like this film. I'm definitely on the side of thinking it's really well done and very strong. I'm probably in the middle. I mean, I really like it. It's not one of my favorite films of that year, but I love Halloween as a horror film and as a film. And I just think the part of it that stands out to me is what Carpenter does at the beginning when it's light. I mean, he creates tension. The score helps, but it's also the craft of how he's able to make a man in the daytime so unsettling, you know. And there is something about that that's not always used. He's outside the window or he's down the street, and just the usage of that require such a mastery of craft and the right score, the right where you're putting the camera, where you're positioning the boogeyman and the evil. And to me, it's a masterclass in that at the beginning. And I love that. And yeah, I just think it's a really, really strong film. And I think what's really impressive about this is, like you said, he had so little to work with that he needed to use, Carpenter needed to use film, just clever filmmaking and clever usage of the medium to get across the horror aspects of it, especially at the beginning. And so that really blew me away when I watched that aspect of it.
One of my favorite moments is when Michael he kills one of the people in the house, and then he just looks up and looks down, and then we cut to Michael coming into the bedroom with the sheet over him with glasses. Why did Michael do that? I have no idea, but I love it. He's playing with the teenage girl.
And this is one I'd love to see in a theater. I never seen this in a theater. I'm sure
I got to see it
with a packed house
on Halloween,
cool.
2 years ago.
Oh wow! Really that would have been cool. Yeah, I'd love to see this with a packed house on Halloween, or not just in the theater.
All right, time we've all been waiting for. Everybody's number one. Paul, we're going to start with you. What's your number one movie of the 1970s?
This will not come as a surprise to anyone who's ever spoken to me about movies. My number one is my number one favorite movie of all time, and that's 1976's Network. I'm going to come out.
I almost thought you weren't going to put this on.
I was kind of sort of tempted. I'm going to come out the gate with some hyperbole. I think this is the great American screenplay. I think that the way this takes our systems of news and reappraises it through the lens of these different people and people at different levels of the news company is such brilliance. I think when it takes these people and uses them as devices to tell the story of the way that news is delivered to people, the way that news affects people, the way that the people delivering the news are affected by the way that they're delivering that is so compelling. And, Peter Finch won the Oscar, and all credit to him. But to me, William Holden is this movie, heart and soul. You see him, it's kind of like real William Holden, too. He's grappling with his aging and the fact that he's not the person that everyone sort of knows him as. And it's him in the waning years of his life. He's grasping onto whatever he can. He enters this relationship with Faye Dunaway's character. And he just wants to feel something, and he feels like he's not really alive anymore. Almost, he's kind of going through the motions. Robert Duvall is one of the great D-bags of all time in this movie. He's such a horrible person. Faye Dunaway, again, super striking in this movie. I think it looks it's one of those movies that I think looks a lot better than it gets credit for. And the way that they position Howard Beale as this figure that the news corporation wants to push forward. It feels so eerily prescient when you watch this movie today. The fact that it was made in 1976 and rings so true today is kind of terrifying. But I love that it has great statements of sort of grandeur, but also about character and people, and what these sort of acts do to people's relationships, and sort of the way that Faye Dunaway kind of poisons William Holden's character is so compelling to me. It's a movie that top to bottom, every aspect of it, I absolutely love. It's really funny, which is, again, something that doesn't quite get talked about enough, I think, is how ridiculous some of the scenarios are, especially the interaction in the beginning at the bar. It's just incredible movie. Not really anything negative I could possibly find to say about it. It's my favorite movie here. It's great.
Yeah, so many great performances in there. You mentioned, I love Faye Dunaway's character, how she's just unapologetically and admittedly a bad person. She knows it, and she's okay. She's this is just who I am. I'm a bad person, and she makes no bones about it. And just what evolves from that, and how that makes her so perfect for that job, which is scary. And Holden's great. I love Ned Beatty. You have
with
the
primal forces of nature.
Just that overtop performance is so good. And it's just the fact that it's a satire, but it doesn't really let you in on the joke. You slowly start to figure it out. It's just such a great way, the way the story is told. It's just a really good. I mean, and it's crazy. Again, we're at number one now, and this is the first time Silly Lament movie's been brought out. And this is the Lament movie I would have put on the list. But I mean, it's definitely a good number one because it is a really solid movie.
Yeah, I actually watched this. I'd seen it before, but I watched this again this year too, so it's really fresh in my mind. I knew Paul would probably have it on the list, but it's definitely right outside. When talking about the 8 to 15 or whatever, this is definitely in that range. I think it's fantastic. Again, this time William Holden's performance really stood out for me too. It's just really, really. It's just his whole life is worn on his face, and he carries himself in such a wonderful wonderful way as a performer. There's something kind of crushing about it as a viewer. And yeah, it's the dialogue is there's so many lines. Speak of the Ned Beatty speech, there's so many things he says in that you just are like, wait, this feels like we are kind of getting closer and closer to some of the stuff that he's talking about, which is always amazing when you look at any film from that long ago. And the framing, that's what's amazing about a film like Network. You can talk about the performance of Ned Beatty, you can talk about, the dialogue, but then you can talk about the framing, those long, lamps and he's at the end, and the choosing to play so much of that scene in that shot is so bold and so exciting. And so when you've got a film that is literally firing on all three of those cylinders is pretty thrilling to me. So yeah, no, I'm not a bad word to say about Network. And it'll be continually scary, but I'm sure every time I revisit it, might be more and more resemble the world we live in, which I'm not necessarily sure will be as fun in 20 years, but we'll see.
Yeah, I rewatched this like 2 weeks ago because I hadn't seen it in like 3 years, and I knew you'd be brought up by someone. Yeah, and you guys, I agree with everything you said. The way, like, talking about Holden, the way he just like leaves his wife just to like sort of inject some sort of like energy into himself, and like no real reason at all. He just decides to leave his wife for like a horrible person. And like obviously the wife played by Beatrice Straight, who like won an Oscar, and she's in one scene. It's always like a crazy fact to think about that. And I love that after all the success like Howard Beale has brought them, they're so prepared to just cut him after one night of like a ratings dip. They're just like, yeah, we'll just kill him like after one night, even though I mean shit, sort of spoilers there, but yeah, like it's just I love that they're just like so casual about it. Yeah, we'll just fire him. He's had like a year of success, but one random Monday it sort of dipped, and they're just ready to let go of him. That's so indicative of the way these corporations work, and yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so I like Network, but just not to the passion and enthusiasm of many others. And I really think it is, I'm just not as fond of cynicism as others can be. And you'll see with my number one pick that I go completely the other route, the opposite of cynicism. But I think there's a lot to, love. I think on a surface level, it is very entertaining. I love Ned Beatty, in the movie. In his short while, I feel like he can steal the scene. He is just, lightning and thunder coming from the sky when he is on. And so I find it entertaining that level. And I know there's a lot more going on with this movie than just the media aspects as far as thematically. But I think it does get a little hurt to where, outside of 1976 now, and we live now, the idea that, TV can be manipulative and exploitive is just kind of like duh. So
yeah, well, I think what's interesting about it, I would say what's interesting about it is the way it feeds into the way media has become manipulative, though, I will say. All right, TV maybe isn't the same for us, but what I always find interesting about it is that it resembles the way social media or that's what I think is interesting about it. But yeah, that's true. TV is literally, yeah, I guess it's interesting to see that it's, of course, it wasn't quite, it morphed, right? The thing that everyone thought was terrible about TV has sort of morphed in so many different ways. Wasn't literally the television.
All right, Zach, go ahead and hit us with that non-cynical number one.
So I was watching Daniel Tiger the other day with my little one. He has no idea what's going on, but I enjoy the show enough. And I was thinking about how the morals or lessons and the meaningfulness of what children's media provide often gets easily dismissed as adults as either like it means nothing to me because it's like simplified for children, or it doesn't really speak to the reality.
On the edge of my seat,
I think that's really unfair, because if we can give a fair chance to children's entertainment, like I'm watching Daniel Tiger, I'm like, you know what? When I get really mad and I want to roar, I need to take deep breaths and count to 4. It's an important lesson. I would probably be a better human if I listen to Daniel Tiger. And I also think I'm a better human when I listen to Winnie the Pooh, my number one as many as it is it's in my class of movies, it's what I call therapy movies. I'm also talking about Daniel Tiger, like the new Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is the same thing, to where like if I feel like I am struggling and I'm being reflective of my flaws. I'm not happy with the way I have, been acting on this earth. Watching Winnie the Pooh or Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood can ground me, remind me what it means to be, kind and good in this earth. It's so much wiser than any child can understand. It's not unique for me to say that there's like philosophical aspects of Winnie the Pooh. There's a whole like series of books of like the Tao of Pooh, the philosophy of Pooh, and I feel like it helps me, at least reminds me what it means to be a bad person. Maybe I'm not acting that out and I'm not following through, but Winnie the Pooh's a goofy little bear, but the way he lived life, and it's kind of lackadaisical, but like carefree and accepting of everything that comes to him. And the other characters represent a lot of the neuroses, but Pooh just having this, the world will come to me as is, and I will take it, and I will always be who I am, and not let it bring me down, is a lot more relevant to what we need to be as adults. And maybe the world would be a better place if people wouldn't dismiss a dumb kids movie, and I don't care.
All right, I think there might be some confusion here, Zach. I didn't ask for Theo's favorite movie from the 70s. I wanted yours.
I think it rings above that.
Oh, man. Okay. Yeah, I think you made the best possible argument for putting The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh as your number one movie of the 70s, but you still put The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh as your number one movie of the 70s.
It's also real funny, and
that's okay.
Real funny, real worthy.
I mean, I'm not going to badmouth you for putting a family movie on, a kids movie. I mean, but you had Muppet movie, great movie. Willy Wonka, great movie. This isn't even a movie. This is a collection of previously released shorts. I asked you for your favorite movie of the 1970s. I could sit there for a half hour and just list off acceptable movies that weren't even mentioned tonight. And you picked reruns of a cartoon show for your number one movie of the 70s. That's not okay. That's not okay. Where's my therapy movie, Zach? I need therapy now. What Winnie the Pooh cartoon do I need to watch to get over this?
Is Kirk doing a Howard Beale impression? Is that what's happening right now?
He's mad as
I
hell.
feel like no one needs Winnie the Pooh more in his life than Kirk does right now. If you watch the movie after, you would take a deep
I don't know.
breath.
Yeah, the thing is, the animation isn't even good. It's like bad 70s animation. There's so much wrong with this pick. Anybody else? Go ahead, say what you got to say.
I mean, I'm not going to badmouth it. I haven't seen this since I was like probably 10 years old, so I feel like my opinion on it is not very well formed. I should have watched it for this. I totally forgot about Zach's. I honestly forgot that this was in the 70s. But yeah, I mean, I remember liking it, but it's like, again, I was 10 years old and it was Winnie the Pooh, so I liked it. So I can't really say. A lot of the movies that Zach has sort of talked about in this vein, I ended up really loving, especially something like Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. So I mean, I'm open to rewatching it and potentially discovering something new inside of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I also, it's been so long. So, I mean, the way you described it, I mean, is great. So, I mean, it's interesting. I don't even know if I've seen it. It's like, I know I watched Winnie the Pooh as a kid, but I'm not sure if I even saw this specific film. I can't remember. So I can't speak too much about it, but it's an interesting pick. It's fun to talk about something a little bit different. You piqued my interest in a lot of stuff you said to kind of go back and rewatch it in a new context, because some of them it had been a little bit of time. But this one, I'm not even sure I ever saw The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh.
Well, there are many of them, so it's a lot to go through.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, I know I've seen Winnie the Pooh. I know I've seen Winnie the Pooh stuff. Like, I'm not sure if I've seen this specific like collection of stuff, but I also haven't seen this since I was like a young kid. I watched a different animated movie from the 70s from a Japanese director. Thinking it might come on the list. I completely forgot about this one as well. So yeah.
You know what? You guys can all go watch, Network and Taxi Driver and think about how much you hate the world you live on. And instead, I'll take deep breaths and relax.
Those are fictional worlds, man. Those are fictional. Helps me feel better about our world. It's even worse than ours.
Yeah, I gotta say thank you, Zach, because it wouldn't be one of my episodes if I didn't have a rant, and everybody else's picks were really good up until now. So at least you gave us that.
They're really good, and mine is like amazing and the best pick you could possibly have. So
all right, Brendan, fix this for us. What's your number one?
I'm gonna go. All right, I'll go again. kind of alluded to it all the way through, but I'm going with it. It's interesting because I had this a little bit lower. This is when I watched the second time, it went up the top, and it is The Godfather. I'm going with it. The best film of the 70s. I think this works.
That is also my number one, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, there you go. Oh, okay. Well, for me, with it's kind of like, it was interesting to hear Paul talk about how he liked being with the family and how and so it's like it's splitting hairs because they're both great films. But when I watched them again, the reason why I think The Godfather is better is that as much as I love the father and son dichotomy, there's a focus and a drive to The Godfather. And, it's funny because you hear about Brando so much, but that Pacino arc in The Godfather just came through so clear when I watched it. And it just, that's what made it go so up for me, is just the idea of him at the beginning in that army suit, trying to be, army uniform, trying to look so different from his family, and the way that his things that happened to his father, and it's when you see the whole picture, the way he is sucked into the world is just wonderful. And I love every performance in it. I love Duvall, James Caan, Brando is fantastic. In what is a supporting role, I know that's something that people talk about a lot. It is a supporting role, but Pacino is this is so fantastic. Everything that he goes through, and to me, it's just that opening shot, that that pull back. I could just talk about it for days. This is the one I've never seen on the big screen. I hope I get to at one point. But yeah, for me, this is just the one I go back to the most of all of these. We talked about character arcs and atmosphere and big themes that are still relevant today, and I just feel like The Godfather, it just has all of it for me. And like I said, there's movies I could list that are talked about as the greatest of all time that don't get there for me, but every time I go back to The Godfather, I'm like, yep, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. So this is also my number one. It had to be for me. Also, people in chat are mentioning Star Wars. Like, as soon as this panel was put together, there's no chance Star Wars is going to be on our list now. Like you said, like when you mentioned at the start where like he's in the soldier suit, where he says like, "That's my family. Okay, that's not me." It's like, man, you just have no idea what's in store for you.
Right.
The scene in the restaurant, and as it's like closing in on Pacino's face and he's deciding, I could watch that scene just every day. It's honestly brilliant. Like I love that he goes off and just this is the many adventures of Michael Corleone. He goes off on in Sicily. In Sicily, it has like a whole.
Actually, just the collection of the TV show. This is not even a movie. This is not a movie. This was the collection of Michael Corleone shorts strung together. They threw Brando in there after the fact.
But I love we go to LA, we meet the movie producer, and we see like the horse, obviously iconic stuff. And there's if everyone knows the YouTube channel Cinefex, they talk about the way at the end when they're sort of I'm blanking on the dude's name, the one who comes up to them at the funeral and asks, and he's the one that gets whacked at the end outside of the compound.
Tessio.
Yes, that's right.
Tessio was always smarter.
Yeah, and it's like it's the right play. He comes out, and all of a sudden the camera pans out, and then just in 1 second, there's 5 people surrounding him, and he's done. Obviously, it's The Godfather. It's just incredible. It's so rewatchable, and like you said, it's a bit tighter than the first movie, which is why I think I put it just a tad above part 2.
I won't go on too much about this. Everybody knows this is my favorite. This is my number one. We did the top 100. But yeah, the movie, there's not a wasted frame on this movie. There's zero fat. I've been watching this movie for over 20 years regularly, and I guess Clemens is too.
Not Apocalypse Now fad though.
But it's I watch it every time I watch it. I'm discovering new things. You could watch different characters from different point of views and different perspectives and get something different out of the performance, and they're part of the story. It's so deep. It's so rich. It is kind of cliche to say it's the greatest movie of all time, but that's because it is. And that scene in the restaurant, Michael, is my favorite scene of all time in any movie. It's so good. Zach and Paul, why do you guys like to be wrong?
So I said it's getting late at night, and so my memory maybe betraying me. But as far as I can remember, there's no scene of Marlon Brando in a small red shirt with his head stuck in a honey pot. And
so again,
am I right?
Apocalypse
so,
Now gets close
so
to
I'll
that, I
take.
think.
I really like The Godfather, and I said I have watched this one somewhat recently. I think this is, same thing I said with Godfather 2. Sometimes I want to be cooler than I am. I think Winnie the Pooh is cooler than like Godfather. But it's hyper engaging and a great family saga more than a mobster saga, and I am moved by some of the relationship of mobster families and how close they are, and that's a weird thing they could do with material that's so dark. And so I do really like and I love The Godfather. It just didn't make my list.
See, the movie was pretty good, but then I thought about it, and I was like, what is Michael Corleone doing between when he gets home from the war and the wedding? They said he hasn't been up to much. This guy's so lazy. Get off your ass and do something
He's
like that.
lots of sex. Lots of Italian sex.
But no, I
It
mean,
was just the many, not all his adventures.
yeah, I guess not.
Many of them, but not all of them.
But I mean, this is one of my favorite movies. I knew it was going to be on there. I just didn't, I there was other movies I would rather talk about. But I love it. I love doing Jack Waltz's voice and yelling "Khartoum" and doing all this kind of shit.
Let me tell you something, my
Yeah.
dollars and cents.
I love it.
Sterling Hayden just eating his veal at the restaurant, like asking them, "Is there anything good here?" Like it's a freaking Italian restaurant. Like, shut up, Sterling Hayden. I mean, it's an incredible, fun, weirdly fun movie, weirdly funny movie too. I love all the different characters. I think Carlo kind of gives a rough performance. Don't love that actor, what he's doing.
The punch. The punch from Sonny is his only flaw in the movie.
But in the
That's all
knuckle,
right
I love this movie. I just want to talk about other movies, and it probably would have been like my number 3 realistically in terms of like personal favorites of the 70s. But I made a choice. Excluded a lot of movies that probably would have been on my list, and this is one of them. But yeah, great. I mean, what else? It's The Godfather. Not a lot of original things to say about it.
I probably should include in the list because it does star, one of our good friends in the community, Lucas Shellbach, playing brilliantly, very truly the character Johnny Fontaine.
That is him. His olive oil voice and getting John.
All right, before we wrap everything up with our final list, let's bring in our producer. He's going to tell us about some things going on. There he is.
How did I get here? Hi. No, I'm used to hiding in my hidey hole behind the scenes. All right. Announcements next week. Kaleb Boatman taking the hosting chair for Cody Newberry. Movies about movies. The lists are due tonight. So if you haven't sent your lists to Kaleb Boatman, do that right now. And we will let you know pretty soon. Or at least Boatman will if you're on the show. Week after that is me. Best film scores. Those are going to be due next week when Boatman is hosting the show. I need your lists for best film scores. No comic book movies because of an announcement coming in a little bit. So all film scores, no comic books. September 23rd is best movie scenes at the 2010s. Again, no comic books. But Cody Newberry will be back, regularly scheduled host once again. Then September 30th, I get to do it again. Best musicals, stage or screen, represented by one song. Then we are doing top 40 comic book movie scenes series for starting the beginning of October. Cody has his panel for that. That is Nick Carley, Nick Twohig, Robert Parker, and blanking. I said both the Nicks, right? Scully. Thomas Scully is the other one. There we go. Yeah, there you go. Send your list to Boatman. I'm going back to the producer role.
Hey, before you go, Koho, come back.
Hi.
Do I do combined list or grades first?
Individuals first, and then we'll do combined.
Okay. All right. We'll wrap it up here, guys. Thanks so much for sticking around. It was a really long episode tonight. Had a lot of fun, a lot of movies we all wanted to talk about. It's kind of hang on episode. A little bit different vibe than we usually do, but it was a lot of fun. Thank you for sticking around. Let's give out some grades. For the most part, everybody did all right. In first place tonight is Brendan Meyer. I'm going to give you an A-.
All right.
Yeah. Brendan and I hadn't met before tonight, so you can't accuse him of pandering, but he did have Godfather 2. He had Taxi Driver on there. A lot of good movies. Only really shortcomings on the list. I'm not a big fan of Cabaret. Days of Heaven I thought was maybe a little high, but otherwise there's nothing on that list to complain about. Let's go
I wrote Coppola. There we go. I leaned into the Coppola and it worked out.
I'm basic. Okay, second place. I'm going to put Michael at a solid B. Michael also had some really good, just standard fare. Couple movies I hadn't seen. I can't blame him for being Australian. So Walkabout and Wake and Freight, I can't take away from him. But he had Jaws on there. Barry Lyndon, a lot of good movies. Paul Oyama also gets a B. Very good list. Blue Collar, Network, Suspiria, all good stuff. A lot of good stuff on the list. Zach, your 10th through 2, you were looking good. You probably would have been somewhere up with these guys. I can't let that number 1 slide. I'd say without that, blank that out. I'm probably going to give you like B minus. That took you down. You get a C minus. So tonight your list sucks. And let's take a look at our combined top 10 of the Your List Sucks 1970s movies. Number 10, Willy Wonka and Chocolate Factory. Number 9, Godfather Part 2. Number 8, Halloween. Number 7, Breaking Away. Number 6, All the President's Men. Number 5 is Zach Rooney, My Show. Number 4, Network. Number 3, Days of Heaven. Number 2, Taxi Driver. And number 1 is The Godfather. All right, guys, we'll cut out. It's been a long night. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Had a great time. We'll see you next time.
My God, what just happened?
You better lawyer up, asshole. Because I'm not coming back for 30%. I'm coming back for everything.
Get what you fucking deserve!
Turn to your lady friend. Duncan, please return to your lady friend.
Long live the king. Hasta la vista, baby.